So we're gathered here today at the confluence of the Bow and the Elbow River that has been a gathering place for thousands of years, where people have come together to share stories, to exchange ideas, and to build relationships. This tradition of collaboration and innovation continues today at the Wave, where we unlock the power of technology to create a better, more inclusive city for all Calgarians. We want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral, traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, made up of the Siksika, Piikani, Amiskapikani, the Kainai First Nations, the Ithaca Stoney Nakota First Nations, that is comprised of the Chiniki, Bearspaw, Goodstoney First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. The City of Calgary is also homeland to the Métis and Ottawatomiekwek Métis government districts 5 and 6. We acknowledge all Indigenous peoples who have lived here and continue to live here on Treaty 7 land. At the Wave, we are dedicated to creating an environment where new ideas can flourish and where the spirit of cooperation and creativity drives our collective progress, inspired by the enduring legacy of this land's First Peoples. And with that, I'd like to welcome you all to day six of the Wave. And so we're getting to be wily veterans at this space. We hope it feels like a welcoming space. It's a place where we really endeavor to live out the 4 strategic pillars of our Smart Cities plan, which is about digital equity, making sure that all Calgarians have access to hardware, software, and education, so they are able to get online and participate in our digital society. There's also storytelling, where we try to make technology approachable to all. So if we're dealing with quantum, how do you make sure that it makes sense to our friends in transportation infrastructure, right? So that's digital equity, storytelling, and then we have experimentation, which is really what this is. This is a sandbox where the city can try and experiment and pilot and play with new technology. Digital equity, storytelling, engagement, and regional collaboration and partnerships. So again, how do we work with our regional communities from Strathmore to Cochrane, from exploring what those collective opportunities are. Again, if our crew here are working with recreation to make an AI chatbot, why can't we, if that makes booking birthday parties at Village Square easier, why can't we share that with our friends in Okotoks? Or if they were all exploring autonomous lawnmowers, why can't we do that together and share those learnings? So with that, I'm gonna actually invite Travis to the stage. Travis is with the city, and they're gonna tell us again just what's next, what we could be looking forward to sharing the sidewalk with.
All right, good morning. Hello to everybody who's here today, and hello to anybody who might be watching online. My name is Travis again, really excited to be here. So I am a City of Calgary employee. I am a senior transportation engineer with the City of Calgary. And I have a fair bit of history working in transportation, for the most part, transportation planning.
I'm going to shut Monique's messages
Absolutely.
off. I'll be back.
So with that experience in primarily network planning, forecasting, a lot of work in strategy and policy, also some time spent in operations and maintenance and transportation infrastructure delivery. But for the last couple of years, I've also been a representative to the Urban Robotics Foundation on behalf of the City of Calgary. And it's in that capacity, really, that I'm here to speak today. And it's on the topic of, thank you, Jason, public area mobile robots, PMRs. And are we ready to share the sidewalk with robots? Which is a great question. And I should maybe first just point out, we've got some pictures here on this title that aren't from Calgary. So notwithstanding our logo, we've got in the upper left imagery from Toronto from 2021 or 2022. And then we have imagery from the United States. I can't remember exactly which campus, potentially more recent, but Starship operating on campus. So not exactly a fully public area, but these are both, I thought, pretty interesting images and sort of representative of what we're here to talk about. I mentioned the Urban Robotics Foundation, and this is a very busy slide, but I really wanted to make sure that I was clear about sort of who they are, what they are, why we're involved with them. As it's noted, it was founded a few years ago. It's a global membership-funded nonprofit organization bringing together people from all of the different fields related to public mobile area robots. Robot manufacturers, representatives of municipalities like myself, but also groups like the Toronto Zoo, for example, and a lot of different parties, basically to work together to help promote understanding of the challenges and the requirements for accommodating and managing public area mobile robots. This is something that we know is coming. Technology is developing. We'll get into that as I go along. But this group has come together or has been developed to help advance the knowledge and help facilitate. And it's a great group. So my initial involvement was at the request of Bern Grush, who was sort of the lead and the global expert on public area mobile robots, especially as it relates to the development of this technical standard, ISO 4448 for public area mobile robots. And so for the first year or so, I was involved in discussions around the development of the standard. And eventually, over time, that standard, by the way, just got published this year officially. Over time, the work on this sort of developed further and coalesced into the Urban Robotics Foundation. It expanded beyond simply developing and delivering this standard. And so we therefore ended up joining the Urban Robotics Foundation, and the work has broadened out into a number of areas, which I'll talk about today. Here are three of the sort of products, the most obvious products that have come out of the Urban Robotics Foundation. The first two are available now, and the last one, I believe, is in development. So an executive guide to PMRs, basically just helping people in a position of decision-making around utilization of capital and resources, and sort of those who are deciding whether to move forward with PMRs. And then also we have the discovery guide to PMRs, which is really a larger document which is intended to help inform and support municipalities and local government as they look at PMRs and how they may be deployed and what we might be addressing. And in that respect, I was actually part of the editorial board for that publication, or the editorial support. And then regulatory guide to PMRs, which is in development and should be available in 2025, which will help with preparing bylaws and regulations for public area mobile robots. All right, what are public area mobile robots? I have to admit, when I first thought about this subject, not knowing anything else about it, sidewalk robots sounds pretty cool. My thoughts went to Star Wars immediately, and I was thinking about that one on the left there running around in front of the stormtroopers in the Death Star, thinking, okay, that's going to be great, but let's hopefully not trip over them. And then, of course, thought, well, at the same time, how are we going to be interacting with these things? And the thought came to mind, Johnny 5, I think it was, from Short Circuit from the 1980s. It's probably not exactly what a lot of the robot providers are thinking about, but nonetheless, this is sort of where it went. But there's some aspects of this which kind of speak to what you're getting into in the dynamic when you're talking about public area mobile robots. They can move, they're public. So let's delve into that a little bit. This is, and I think it'll launch for me. This is a really good video that Starship, one of the sort of I guess robot providers that are sort of the largest, have the largest deployed fleet in North America, particularly in the US. This is a little video that they did sort of speaking to what a day in the life of one of their public area mobile robots looks like. And so I'm going to play this. It's not very long, but I thought it was really illuminating in terms of how are these integrating into daily lives within a community? What's actually happening? What does it look like? And so I think this does a really good job. So we'll just play this. right, thanks for indulging me there with that. But I think as I go along and we talk a bit more about some of the different impacts and the different points of interaction that these robots have with the public environment, that will help set the stage a little bit for some of them, and it'll make it easier for me to illustrate them. So as we get into the more formal definition of a public area mobile robot, this comes from the technical standard, but wheeled or legged or ambulatory ground-based device that is designed to travel along public shared active transportation pathways without the use of visible human assistance or physical guides. All right? There's a number of different components to that. I'll break them down as we go forward, but here's a few different examples from around the world. We've got some kind of more police type PMR on the left bottom. In the middle, I'm not sure exactly what the purpose of that one is. I think it might just be some type of maintenance bot. And then on the right, something I've actually seen here in Calgary. One of the first things I ever encountered in Calgary actually of this type was a cleaning robot similar to the one on the lower right in the Palliser complex when I was at working for transportation infrastructure. So it's not that these things haven't been here before. What does that look like in the bigger picture? I'm borrowing here figures and pictures from the Urban Robotics Foundation, but I think this is particularly helpful and just in terms of trying to identify. We have the larger community or population of robots generally. This would include all the different kinds of robots that you would typically think about: manufacturing, production robots, stationary robots, you name it. Then we move into a subset that are mobile, the ones that can move under whatever control, but they can move around. Within that subset, we get down to the nitty-gritty of public area mobile robots. And then finally, within that, there's a subset of personal delivery devices, which are the type of PMRs that most people are familiar with, the ones that we tend to think of first. And so I've shown 3 examples here of public area mobile robots. Upper left, we've got somebody who's utilizing it for mobility support or assistance. That's in an airport setting. Upper right, we have a form of snow and ice control. At lower right, we have a sweeping robot. And at the bottom left, in the personal delivery devices, we actually have a food delivery robot, and we'll talk more about that one. I think this is a really powerful photo. I'm always impressed by it. So how are we defining PMRs again? Well, they're defined by where and how they're being deployed. So obviously they're operating in the public realm or the semi-public realm. And what does that mean? Well, public realm would be outside on the street, the actual right-of-way, sidewalk primarily, right? Curb space and such. Semi-public realm gets into the area where it may be owned by somebody else, but it still is integrated and it functions it feels like a public realm. So it could be the entrance to their building, right? It could be a courtyard. In some cases, the semi-public realm could be a university campus, which feels pretty open. You and I could go and walk there, but it's not actually, operated by the city, for example. So it's a semi-public realm, feels like a public realm. And these robots are intended to operate within that area. They operate amongst bystanders. This is really key, right? They are intended to be able to operate freely on the street. And they're going to have interactions as a result. And finally, they operate without reliance on physical guides. So, it's not like we've got magnets buried under the sidewalk and they're following, missing rails or anything. Like, these are actually operating fairly autonomously. They're using technology to understand where they are and to make decisions on how to react in response to the information that they are sensing around their environment. Like I said, this is an interesting photo, and as I understand it from the information, it was taken by a member of the Urban Robotics Foundation, and the person walking the dog wasn't even necessarily aware that the PMR was there, which is pretty interesting and can become important, and I'll show an example later. So they're ground-based. They operate with wheels or legs. I don't have a Boston Robotics example here, but if you've seen their sort of virtual dog-type robots, you'll have an idea of what it could also look like. And we're not talking about drones, aerial drones here, so this isn't anything to do with that. Like I said, they're operating in public and semi-public spaces. And no visible operator, so it's not like there's a minder there with them. There's not somebody that's come along with them, that's watching them or actually operating them. Like, these are designed to operate in place with autonomous or semi-autonomous systems, or possibly being teleoperated at a distance, but not with somebody right there. Okay, so that does make it different. If something goes wrong, there isn't somebody immediately there to solve the problem in that physical space. They can be remotely operated, as I mentioned. They can carry humans as passengers. And they can also be electronically tethered to follow a human, which is an interesting concept. And that's another example picture I'll show after. So here's a slide showing a number of different delivery PMRs. And so some of these may look familiar. The upper left is Starship, which is what we watched on the video. We also have FedEx and Prime PMRs, which were part of projects and programs that were in place. Actually, in the case of FedEx and Prime, both of those have actually come to a halt or been scaled back, as is the want with technology on the bleeding edge. Some things move forward, some things stop, some things go backwards. And then at the upper right, we have something that was actually on the streets of Vancouver just at the end of 2022, delivering Pizza Hut, I think on Robson Street. There was a couple of these units. And all of them are represented at the bottom in terms of relative size to a human. In this case, a human male. I can't say exactly what the size of the human was, but you can basically assume that Starship will take you out at the knees. Just kidding. But it's about up to that height. But then you can go from that, which could be 50 pounds, let's say, all the way up to something in the order of maybe 250 pounds. And so, they scale in terms of size and payloads. Other potential use cases for PMRs. I mentioned the Follow Me robot. Upper right-hand illustration is something of an example of that. So, this thing follows you around and basically brings your stuff, and, it's almost like a backpack of sorts, but it's smarter than that in theory. But there's a lot of application areas potentially. So we've got, as I mentioned, mobility assistance, asset inspections, asset maintenance, cleaning and snow and ice control, parking management is a possibility, security certainly, presence monitoring, waste removal, personal service robots, as I mentioned, visitor information and wayfinding. These are all potential applications for robots that are capable of the type of functions that we've discussed. And some of these functions already occur, but not in public or semi-public spaces. In private sense, in companies, there are inspection and security robots already that are operating, but those are within private property, within boundaries. So what is driving PMR deployment? Why is it becoming relevant now? Obvious is technological advancements in robotics and autonomous vehicles. But there's also growth in the robot market generally. Really terrific growth, actually, with enormous projections. Growth in e-commerce. This isn't a surprise to anybody. We buy a lot of stuff online. That is only growing. Canadians are happy to buy online as anybody. So that commerce is huge. There's a lot of money there. But we also see, and this is in part a result of the growth in e-commerce, growth in on-street retail delivery vehicle traffic. There are a lot of Amazon and other vehicles running around making deliveries, and everybody sees that every day, right? It's a real growth area. And it comes with impacts, emissions, contributions to congestion. So this is something that we may not want to necessarily encourage, or at least we may want to look at alternatives and other ways of delivering goods. There's been interest in contactless delivery since the pandemic. That interest hasn't entirely gone away. There's transformation in retail distribution networks. So the old model of going to bricks and mortar stores is changing. And we're not building malls everywhere now so that everybody can go and have it's the same mall experience all over the place. We know that in a lot of cases, major retailers are moving away from being everywhere to having boutique locations that allow you to come and try on their experience, try on or customize your order and then have it delivered after the fact. Again, more reliance on e-commerce. We also know that distribution networks are changing. There is a push and an interest in creating more community-oriented distribution networks. So taking advantage in some cases of the very change in bricks and mortar and mall turnovers, redevelopments into community distribution centers, another notch down from like the big distribution centers we're familiar with, local warehousing, local distribution within communities. This is happening, and we'll see more and more of that. PMRs are a part of that picture because PMRs can be deployed at a local distance for last mile delivery. If you're going to push your distribution network into communities, PMRs actually allow you to accomplish last mile deliveries from, to a certain degree, from where you are already going to be and where you can take a vehicle and then deploy from that vehicle. So they're part of the bigger picture. A lot of opportunities. This comes from the Urban Robotics Foundation, but I'll just focus here primarily on the municipal column. We know there are underserved areas. Things like grocery store deserts are real things. There's a lot of potential data-driven insights to be realized. These things are nothing if not good for providing or at least generating data, obviously subject to appropriate requirements for data reporting and data sharing. As someone who's worked a lot in transportation modeling, you're always looking for agents that you can send through a network to send you back good data on how networks are performing. These have that possibility. As someone who's worked in transportation operations and snow and ice control, and as I pointed out to a panel discussion once, these kinds of robots can give you useful data on traction, how are their wheels spinning. And in Sweden, for example, they would actually even use a form of optical or laser detector or sensor to help with that information, provide that information. And then even public safety or public cleanliness. These are potentially subject to a lot of other considerations. The PMRs could provide function not only in cleaning the streets, but a presence, right? Imagine the opportunity if you needed for somebody to basically, like we have for security on LRT platforms or around station areas. These types of robots provide the potential for that, but not in one place, right? And a lot of other opportunities. So just a very quick example of PMRs in the real world. What does it look like when we've deployed these things? This is just a brief video. You may have seen this before. So that's sort of, I think, a fairly well-known clip of a delivery robot attempting to go right through the middle of a Los Angeles police taped-off scene. Oblivious. They let it through. Well, actually, that's what amazed me. They didn't bother trying to actually interfere with it. If the video continued, you'd see it go down the street and everybody move out of the way and hold up police tape and everything. So people actually defer to these things a fair bit. But this is part of trials and tribulations. So this is, what does it look like when they're on the street and they haven't encountered everything? Let's talk more about Canada. How it started. In 2021, Jeffrey, the pink delivery robots were deployed in Toronto. A lot of interest, a lot of attention. I think a lot of people like them from what I've read. They became quite notable. Not too long after, Toronto City Council ultimately voted to ban, they call them pavement robots here, it's not really the right way to refer to them, but they ultimately ended up voting to ban them, at least for now, on an interim basis. And I'll talk about what some of those reasons were. But so we've had some false starts, let's say. And actually this was similar to what occurred in Ottawa. And I think in part it was Tiny Mile, I believe, is the company that supplied the robots. A bit of an aggressive approach on their part. Let's get these things on the street and see what happens. Didn't turn out as well as probably they hoped, but I'll give them credit for trying. Notwithstanding that, however, though, we've had some other great examples. So I mentioned pizza delivery in Vancouver. So this occurred later, so it had the benefit of more of the learned experience from, say, Toronto and Ottawa. It was a trial. It was up front. They were clear this was a trial. It's not going to happen for very long. A lot of controls on it, and it was only 2 robots. But more recently, and this is something I think which is really important to highlight, note the date on this, October 2nd, 2024. So here is an example of fully autonomous PMR robots being deployed at the Toronto Zoo. And they're actually going to be delivering meals, the food, for animals within the zoo grounds. And so it's a semi-public space, a little bit safer environment, controlled location. Toronto Zoo is part of the URF, and so is the robotics company. So it's maybe an example of a trial done the right way. And so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Lots of challenges that have to be addressed when PMRs show up or are accommodated. Public acceptance, traffic orchestration, how do you manage them? Obviously regulatory frameworks, data privacy once we start talking about data, safety concerns to say the least, liability management. We say these things only go as far as the insurance companies are comfortable letting them go. So I always watch the insurance companies. Cybersecurity, issues around infrastructure readiness. This gets more to the point of what went wrong with the Toronto and Ottawa sort of initiatives. The CNIB, who is a member as well of the Urban Robotics Foundation, felt it necessary to get involved and intervene in a way. Intervenes, maybe there's the wrong word, but to make a clear statement on their concern about the risks to vulnerable street users as a result of these devices moving around and the fact that it hadn't been clearly addressed. And ultimately, you know, their position and others in that sort of line led to Toronto City Council banning the operation on the streets for a period of time, pending further study. And what it really speaks to is, you know, we can't forget that the public space that is there is for people first, and everything else has to revolve around that. And we have fought, in a way, with ourselves for decades in terms of defining the right balance between providing for automobiles, providing for vehicles, but also not forgetting that the street at the end of the day serves people, right? And active modes, people in the active modes planning profession will tell you that hard-fought gains to make sure that the public realm is there and properly planned and available in an equitable way. And so anything we introduce to it is competing for space and is introducing conflict. And if we do that and we haven't thought through or considered, you know, sort of the highest risks to vulnerable users and to others, then we really we're not prepared. We haven't done this right. We haven't done our homework. And this is what I think the CNIB has pointed out, among others. And so it's a good example of, you know, being hasty creates waste, to say the least. There's other things that we have to consider. I believe this is from the United States, but we've got examples where, you know, they're still learning how to interact, these PMRs, or at least the programming and the programmers. And so here's an example where they're blocking, you know, the accessible sidewalk ramps. People will walk around them. People, again, are actually, to a large degree, very willing to be flexible with these things in the environment. They're novel, but we have to remember, like, they're actually blocking space that's there for people who need these ramps. We need to address this. Public interactions. This is interesting. You see a range. I'll maybe address the most interesting one at the lower left. This is actually a YouTube video. You can go and watch it. But in this particular case, a gentleman was walking his dog. Dog's off leash. That may or may not be allowed in that particular area. Robots coming towards them. The robot changed direction. The dog was started. It was upset by it. The gentleman's response was to kick the robot over. Didn't appreciate its presence, didn't appreciate the interaction with his animal. In other examples, more benign examples, we have at the top center pedestrians pressing the walk button for robots because they can't do it themselves. We have at that same or similar corner to the one I showed you earlier, we had a robot get stuck on the curb. People are like, yeah, let me help you out. And then the bottom shows it's actually from an event that was held, I believe, to help sort of engage people on PMRs and what they felt about them, solicit information. But what it shows is a lot of kids like to interact with PMRs because, as you notice, a lot of the robot manufacturers will put faces and, sort of anthropomorphize them, if you will. And so we know that they kind of get drawn to them. And that can be a good and a bad thing at the same time. So public interactions and understanding and thinking about that become important. Utilization of space. If you're a municipality and you decide to allow PMRs onto your streets, you also have to think about, how are they going to organize themselves? When we have a crosswalk and people have to wait to cross the street, people generally sort themselves out. It's one of the things we learn earliest in life is how to work with others and stay out of the way and, be aware of others' needs. PMRs are still learning this in terms of the programming. So how do you organize them, or what's necessary to ensure that they'll be good participants in street life? An example here, obviously, it's not so bad when you've only got one PMR on the corner and you might tell it to stay out of the way. And then you get three and they all want to cross the street and they're lined up, effectively blocking the sidewalk at that point, which is unacceptable. You get more PMRs and now you've got to decide where do you want them to go. And if there's curb drops there on the left, you've got sort of a wall of PMRs in the way. But I mean, don't get me wrong, people will stand there too, but people will move out of the way, right? PMRs would have to do the same. And I have to admit, when I see that image, it always reminds me of those gang boxes for newspapers that we used to have and the space that they would take up at the corners, which, if you notice, are completely gone now, right? Big deal 10, 15 years ago, now completely gone. And which also speaks to my sort of opinion that in some ways PMRs are kind of like if you took newspaper box and you threw in a little bit of a, Dyson robot vacuum and maybe a bird scooter, you've got this combination of things going on. I said Dyson, like it's a smart vacuum I'd be throwing in there. But otherwise, again, on the other example, you've got a variety and they're moving around and they're allowing space through. So what kind of behavior do you need to request or require in terms of how these things socialize? Because you're going to get into situations where they're going to move in packs, right? And we see this behavior with couriers. We see this behavior with the FedExes of the world coming out. I live, in the north part of town. I see them coming out from their distribution centers at the airport all the time. They'll be FedEx, Pure Later, right? And it's not a bad thing, but this is we could have something like that happening on our sidewalks, right? So we have to think about this, or even just simply parking. Where do we park these? It's no different in that sense than scooters. Where do we want them? Are they creating obstacles? Is that the best use of that space? These are things we have to think about. So in terms of regulatory considerations, I've just listed a number here. This is not a comprehensive list. And again, if you're looking for that, I would direct you towards the Urban Robotics Foundation's materials. But data sharing, obviously a permitting framework that has to incorporate enforcement. Again, I'm thinking of newspaper boxes because we used to have to enforce and permit those. Spatial restrictions, time of day, congestion responsive. Are there places we don't want them at certain times? And we have that around the world with cars. There's nothing to say that when you consider the limited capacity for sidewalks to accommodate humans as well as wheeled vehicles, we may have to do the same. Payload restrictions, dangerous goods, where do you want dangerous goods? Performance specifications, protocols for how they deal with breakdowns, safety, parking in the public realm. Other operational considerations, identification of preferred or designated routes. There may be places we want them. Adverse environmental conditions, obviously, and as you can see, this is an example of a Starship moving around in some snow. Interaction with curb space management systems. We're developing approaches to managing our curb space for vehicles and interactions across this curb space. These start to become relevant, especially if they're deployed from the curb, which they might be from other vehicles. Spatial assignment, where do we want them at what time? Occupancy pricing. Basically, there's a value to being in the public or semi-public realm. How do we price that, right? Otherwise, if we don't price it, what signal are we sending? Interactions between PMRs and temporary traffic controls are closed and restricted street segments. The Urban Robotics Foundation speaks to a staged approach to managing deployment, 5-stage from discovery to wait and see approach to governance, research and development, and then into deployments, stages of deployment. And I think it's fair to say that the example of things that have gone wrong didn't get past, stage 2 and hit an accessibility wall because the work hadn't been done to ensure that key things had been addressed. And so they're coming back now, right? They're looping back. And so when we start to talk about are we ready, we should be asking ourselves, where are we on this continuum? And what do we need to proceed? Like I said, discovery is really about learning. Preparation is budgeting, proposing, testing, floating the idea and making sure that people are ready for it. And then you move into different levels of deployment. We're not there yet, but we can't go directly to it. So I'm going to wrap this up. Conclusions. The business cases for deploying PMRs are improving. And so we're going to see them at some point, and we need to be preparing for that. We have applicable knowledge from the regulation of things like Uber, e-scooters, bike share, even newspaper boxes, but taking a wait-and-see approach to managing PMR deployment has not proven to be successful, so you can't sit on your butt. The application of a disability lens or an accessibility lens to the development of PMR policies and regulations is going to be critical to addressing the significant risk that they could pose to vulnerable street users. If you can't address that, then why would you go any further? On the flip side, they could be very valuable if you get that right. And there's a lot of resource materials and opportunities for collaboration available via the Urban Robotics Foundation. And so I would urge people to check that out. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and we may or may not have some time for some questions.
We will open it up for questions, but I just want to thank Travis for coming by. Travis is one of my favorite engineers. I don't have a lot of them, but no, but I think Travis, if you ever need to feel humble, just invite Travis to come speak. Not only is he super smart, but if you play Trivia Pursuit with him, you will leave feeling very self-conscious. You're very good at Trivia Pursuit. Yeah, really good. It makes me uncomfortable. All right, so do we I have one question to start though, and you can even grab the mic out of there.
Okay.
And we'll look like a comedy duo. You'll be the straight man.
I'm ready.
So okay, so are you seeing the willingness in Calgary for policy to allow some of this to happen?
Yeah, I think so. I'll turn it around and say I'm not seeing anything that suggests that there's an unwillingness, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of interest in this as a development, technological, commercial. Calgary has traditionally been pretty open to that idea of trying things, right? I think the fact that it hasn't happened here is notable, right?
Yeah.
And so, no, I think we're open to it. But I think also we like to learn from others and try to, not just do the same thing over and over if it hasn't worked elsewhere. So I think, I know our policy group's already aware of this and has thought about it. Like I said, we have put a lot of work in over the years into the public realm and semi-public realm in any event. So we've been thinking about, how do we incorporate other technologies? So I think the groundwork's there.
Yeah.
But doing it right is what matters. And as long as we're committed to doing that, which I'm sure that we are, the city is, then that's the right approach.
And you use is it the URF, the Urban Robotics Foundation?
Yes, Urban
Right.
Robotics Foundation.
And I think they saw just the idea of getting some standards and policy that's the norm across other cities I like that, because if you look at even scooters, like the policy for scooters on road or on sidewalk is completely different between Edmonton and Calgary, right?
Yeah.
Here they're only on streets, there they're only on sidewalks.
Well, and I should point out the Urban Robotics Foundation, of course, doesn't make policy, so that, you know, that's always going to be the purview of the municipalities. But what they will do is they'll say they definitely have advanced the definition of standards, like the kind of standards that you have to have in place that are irrespective of municipality. And then they're advancing and facilitating the discussion and the understanding so that municipalities are prepared, right, and understand what it's going to take, along with everybody else, the providers, the potential service or commercial entities. So they're creating that space for understanding, but they definitely are focused on the standards and making sure that the technical standards exist that need to be there.
Nice. All right, any questions from the audience? Let's go, Conrad.
Hi, Travis.
Hi, Connor.
Thank you for that lovely presentation. Quick question around cost effectiveness. Do you have any data from the Urban Robotics Foundation about maybe, you know, offsetting costs using this technology versus another?
Offsetting costs to commercial retailers. I don't have specific information on that. That's something I'd have to go in and dig in and pursue. It's definitely identified as a potential benefit, so I think there's got to be something to that. There's certainly interest on the part of retailers and e-tailers to go that direction. I can tell you that, you know, there has been a look at the emission savings that result. There has been a look at energy that it takes to move, say, a 1 pound parcel, that final mile. So a lot of last mile type analysis, but specifically I'd have to go in and take a look. But we could do that, Conrad.
Yeah, thanks.
That's great. You think of even the reduction in injuries to our postal workers if they didn't have to carry those heavy bags, right? All right, and they could walk faster. In the back. Oh, sorry, Larry. Good morning.
Hi, I'm Tita. I'm a business strategist from Calgary Transit. My question is around liability and around insurances. So for example, if you are using this vehicle to pilot from a technological point of view, I believe the TRL is still 2 to 4 in range in terms of commercializing it. So when you're testing it for the city, are you leasing it or are you owning it? Because if you're leasing it, has it been figured out if some accident happens or something, who's going to pay the insurance and things like that?
Yeah, great questions. You know, to date, most of the deployments have been commercial entities unto themselves that have entered into agreements with the municipality. They've retained ownership of the devices. So the city has acted more in its traditional role of permitting or regulating the operation of a privately owned, in this case, robotic vehicle, interacting on city-controlled streets. But you're absolutely right. Like, liability is one of the major question marks that hasn't been worked through, let's say, in detail. Sometimes some of that takes experience, but you know, the case where we saw pedestrians interacting with a robot that got stuck on the curb, for example, you know, what if somebody hurts themselves trying to shift a robot? What if somebody, you know, there was actually one example I saw where there was a gentleman who was working on a building and stepped back, contractor, to let a robot pass through, and then he's sort of like urging it along, kicking it with his foot. I mean, these are interesting physical interactions, but if somebody comes back at some point and says, I've actually sustained an injury as a result, you know, the city will say, well, you know, that has to be addressed with the private operator, but the insurance has to be there for that, and the city has to require that insurance be in place, right? And so I think we have models for that based on the things that are currently operating in our public right-of-way, like scooters, bike share and such. But, you know, there's no guarantee that the arrangements that we have for those will be perfect or exactly appropriate for application to robots. And so a trial would be an opportunity to try to, if necessary, be overly conservative in terms of protecting the interests of everybody involved, and then figuring out how to peel it back to something that makes sense on a, you know, that can be scaled up in the future. So I don't think it's insurmountable, but you're right. There's major questions there. And like I said, I will always watch the insurance industry and interest, out of interest, because I think they sometimes play a bigger role than we always perceive in terms of how these things go.
Yeah. And we have had living labs that have been autonomous vehicles, and I think we even had one on the sidewalk, a robot delivery as a living lab. So we do make sure that they have liability insurance. So that's one of the pieces for living labs. And then for the autonomous bus, I mean, that was one of our first living labs with Monique, Andrew Sador, and David Basto. And they delivered people from the Science Center to the zoo and back and forth. But that was 2017, 2018? Yep.
Where the autonomous shuttle ran in the tree when the operator was driving the vehicle. It was a gray area. It was not on a fixed route.
Right.
So after that, the whole autonomous pilot industry kind of shut down in Ontario because of the
Wow.
Durham incident.
Really? Yeah, well, see, and whereas the bus that we had, everybody's back, the bus that we had would stop for magpies and gophers and rabbits, right? So you've got 12 people on a bus, right? And it lurches to a stop. So I think that led to another living lab at the zoo where we had cameras taking pictures, thousands and thousands of pictures of the Canadian animals in the wildlands exhibit, so we could understand which animals you stop for, moose, which ones maybe you consider not lurching people for. All right, there were some more questions. Sandra.
Of course. Do you know, is the Urban Robotics Foundation, are they collecting statistics on the number of vandalism, how many of these robots are being vandalized, the robots being stolen in its entirety, the payloads being stolen, any of those types of statistics to really warrant or offset the viability of having these robots?
I don't know if they are specifically, but I'm sure their members, which includes some of the robot providers and the service providers like Starship, are aware of that information. So it's possible that it's available, but we'd have to check with the Urban Robotics Foundation, in terms of themselves. I haven't looked for a report or study on that. I'd be interested in knowing too. I mean, we know with something like scooters, there's a certain degree of scooters that every year get tossed in the Bow River or otherwise get damaged or vandalized. I'm not sure how it changes when you get into something on the order of a personal delivery robot or something larger, right? But it's a good question, and I don't know specifically. I'm sorry.
Yes, of course.
One quick follow-up to the efficacy of these robots, and particularly, I have a background also in food safety, and so just considering that some foods have to be kept at like the hot food have to be kept at a certain temperature range, cold food, the same thing. Calgary has can have different weather fluctuations. So the comment would be is just that this would come under the purview, I suspect, of Alberta Health Services in having to deploy their inspectors to monitor these robots and also ensure that they are sanitized on a regular basis to prevent any pathogenic contamination or transfer of pathogens to further food deliveries.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure. A good point. Again, I think it would be basically the way it would relate would be, this is just a service similar to a driver, skip the dishes. Obviously not the same, and with some situations where it could be very different. But the onus goes back to those who prepare the food in terms of how it's prepared and the services that are provided or they choose to use, and then the actual service provider who would have a performance contract, presumably with the restaurant, for example. So yeah, the city wouldn't be directly involved. The province would certainly be involved and concerned with how that works. But again, it's sort of an extension or a new version of something that we already have an existing model for, right? Mm-hmm. With skip the dishes, for example, that type of driver delivery. Some days I wonder if the stuff that gets delivered, to my door by a driver would be warmer if it came by robot. But nonetheless, I think these are things that have to be thought through. But there are existing frameworks, right, regulatory frameworks that would probably require adjustments or tweaks, and then the enforcement piece and how do you enforce it. And that's going to be a very different wrinkle. And on a broad level, I mean, you know, if you have a large number of PMRs operating in a given municipality, that could really change the resourcing required, right, to keep up with it, for sure.
Yeah, I think that robot on screen would be a prime target for the raccoon gangs in Ottawa, right? Like, do you think they'd soon learn that there's a good meal in there? Christopher?
From the definition of the PMR, it sounds like it would also apply to larger scale, apart from like the smaller delivery robots, but eventually to medium-sized, full-sized semis, buses, and taxis. Do you see that the industry is trying to use the lessons learned from the mini delivery robots to be able to apply to larger ones, vice versa, as well as URF's role within it all?
There's definitely an element of, you know, let's apply the lessons, certainly from delivery robots to other forms of PMRs. I don't think the PMR definition is intended to get into street running vehicles per se, autonomous street vehicles. So I would make the differentiation there. So when you hop to the other side of the curb, if you will, you're probably into a different area of responsibility. And certainly in behavior on the street, that dynamic, it changes, right? Traffic Act and everything. But that being said, you can get some really big potential robots that still fit this definition. And you know, you might have a 50-pound Starship, but if you can go to 250 pounds, I mean, I was thinking about that, you know, that's like getting tackled, right, if something was to run into you. So there's a lot of mass and potential momentum there. So it does change some of the considerations in terms of, you know, how do you manage the potential for collisions and the energy that could be involved, and where should these things be going? But fundamentally, you're coming back to the question of, you're operating in public or semi-public space, public or semi-public realm, typically sidewalk type thing. So what's appropriate behavior in that environment, right? And then how do we ensure that these robots can follow what we deem to be appropriate? We have to first be able to define it, and then make sure that they know or are contractually obligated or in a regulatory environment are required through regulation to behave that way. And then we have to be able to enforce it, right? And so, you know, if nothing else, the amount of energy involved with a larger robot makes that even more important. But, you know, again, those little ones look like pretty good trip hazards too. I don't want to be going over them as well. So it's a challenge. And I think what we'll see is that, you know, delivery robots, because of their commercial appeal and the business cases behind them, are the vanguard. But what will follow, we'll apply the lessons learned from those as we see what else comes through. And this is not going to be, you know, hey, we've got it fixed, we've got it sorted, we know exactly what we're doing now, and, you know, any PMRs that want to come in and go through, you know, we haven't had that experience as a city operating, you know, our public spaces. It's not going to be the experience here with PMRs. These regulations are going to have to evolve over time. There's going to be learnings. And you know, even the Urban Robotics Foundation, they recognize that their guides are going to change over time. And so we really need to share knowledge, you know, and I'm also struck by the fact that, you know, somebody from City of Airdrie might be listening to this, going, well, we haven't seen any PMRs on our street yet, but, you know, when that happens, you know, we don't have maybe the same experience that the City of Calgary or we don't have the same experience that the City of Toronto has. So we need to, as municipalities, we need to share, right? Share information, share experiences, so that we don't have to learn all the same lessons, you know, over and over. That's the other thing that strikes me, you know, when I consider your question. Yeah,
That's great. Travis, thanks again. We're so lucky to have you on the URF and being a part of these global discussions. You're going to speak here again, lots more, I'm sure. So we'll bring you back in when you've got, you know, when we have our first robot on the streets. That'd be great. And with that, I just want to say thanks. And we're going to take a 10-minute break. So, all right. Next, we have Amber and Conrad speaking to us on e-cargo bikes and the future of our pedal future. Sure, something like that. Big fans, big fans. Let's go.
All right, good morning, everyone. So I'm Amanda, and I work in public space and mobility policy as a transportation planner. So prior to coming to the city, I do have experience within economic development and technology. And I worked for a company that actually helped put those tiny mile robots on Toronto Street. So I'm very familiar with this landscape of the fact that we have a lot of change coming in our pedestrian and public spaces. And so a part of my interest in being here is how do we maintain that space in a way that it's still accessible and safe for pedestrians?
Good morning, folks, and to anyone joining online, thank you for gracing us with your presence here this morning. I think following on what Travis was saying with public space and mobility in action through the robotic technologies he spoke about, I think it's a great segue into what we will discuss here today. And my name is Conrad Kassir. I'm also with Public Space and Mobility Policy. And part of my interest in being here is anything to do with the little letter E in front of whatever goods movement or people movement or whatever moves things. And with things also mean people. Whatever we're moving, if we can do it in a zero emission way, if we can do it in a low carbon way, then I'm interested. So I've got a bit of a background in policy work, in international development, and looking at the difficult questions around electric and other forms of mobility and how to get us from policies to implementation. It's a very long journey to make those things happen, but yeah, today we'll address shortly how to move goods in urban environments, and I'd like you to think about Calgary as a growing city. More and more people are moving to cities. By 2050, more or less 70% of people globally will be living in urban environments, which means that the way we move ourselves and our goods probably should adapt.
Great, thank you. So how we're going to structure this presentation is a bit of a dive into why this change is occurring and what are the drivers of that. As we look at drivers, it'll be a question of why consider e-cargo bikes in the first place. Then we'll provide some examples of where this change is actually happening. So there is a quiz on this portion of the presentation, so do keep your thinking caps on. And then lastly, we'll loop it back to the Calgary context to get a sense of what policies and tools we need to use in order to enable or even manage the technology that does come onto our streets. So this is the why. And there is certainly a lot of overlap between the why of e-bikes and the why of delivery robots that Travis mentioned as well. And the first why that we found again and again and again is that consumer demand has changed. Unsurprisingly, during COVID, there was a lot of shift to e-commerce and digital-only marketplaces like Amazon. And conservative estimates now say that approximately, if we look at 10 people in the room right now, 6 of you are shopping online at least once per month. Again, that's very conservative, and we can understand that with that change comes a change in consumer expectations with how those deliveries arrive to them. So the new expectation is that you're getting a delivery same day or next day, and you're getting it delivered directly to your house. So from a logistics provider standpoint, that's putting a lot of pressure on them to manage deliveries in a way that is efficient, expedient, and is satisfying their consumers. Secondly, with additional vehicles on the road, we are seeing an increase in congestion and just overall emissions on our streets. As delivery vehicles are typically diesel run, when they're sitting and idling in traffic, that does cause some pressure on the causing increased emissions and pollutions within our cities. So from, again, the logistics providers are thinking about ways that they can manage their emission outputs in a more sustainable fashion, which is leading a bit of the change there. And then the last consideration is for worker safety and then also public safety. Delivery vehicles are heavy machines, and unfortunately, there's really no easy way to put this, but when delivery vehicles or vans are involved in collisions with motorists, they're more likely to lead to a fatality than with other smaller vehicles. So it's definitely something to consider from both the logistics standpoint and then also from the city standpoint. How do we manage this change that is rapid and oncoming? So in the Calgary context, there is definitely a lot of economic activity and that is happening within goods movement. So from the data that we have, from 2002 to 2017, daily truck volumes increased by over 55% on Calgary roads. And this is a conservative estimate and also an outdated estimate, as you know that Calgary's population is steadily continuing to grow. Some of the goods that are moving through this network that already exists here are just listed here in this chart. And when we think about e-cargo bikes, it's really essential to think about what commodities are what commodities are suitable to move within an e-bike, such as the one that we have here up front. Everything that's listed in this bright red, it's a heavy industry. That's not necessarily a commodity that's suitable, appropriate, or even right-sized for an e-bike. But on these general freight and food products, these are products that are going typically directly to consumers, and they might present a really great opportunity to move products from businesses directly to consumers, even part of the time. So we're not necessarily thinking about a full replacement of consumer goods through e-bikes, but more of a way to supplement how we move goods around Calgary.
My turn. So if we speak about electric cargo mobility, first of all, take a look at this bike over here. We're very happy that we could loan this from the bike shop here nearby. And this is an example of what we mean by electric cargo mobility as a possible solution to improve our goods movement across not just the greater downtown here in Calgary, but also other areas, communities, neighborhoods. And maybe it inspires neighboring municipalities as well to think about how we can use these innovative tools. So on this particular bike, you'll see there is a loading space here in front. Some bikes do have the loading bays at the back or elsewhere. So this configuration of how this bike is built is only one example and really brings about the option of being innovative in how we deliver our goods. I'm not too sure exactly what the load capacity of this one is, but we'll get to it. Okay. So yeah, great. Thanks to the bike shop for letting you see this in person. So if we think about getting this to be a more day-to-day around Calgary, we've got to think about what are some of the drivers that lead us to implementing these types of technologies. So the first thing we see from our research and what we see out and about every day is that innovation matters. And there are two areas that I want to touch on today. One is the technological advancement, both in modular and electric innovation. And it's also spaces like this here at the Wave where we can really play with these kind of questions around how to innovate. Which questions should we be asking about innovation in this space? What kind of research and development would be the correct research and development so that we can solve the correct problem around goods movement and using e-cargo bikes as a tool? In many ways, we see a lot of research and development happening in other cities. Calgary is a little bit behind. But that gives us an opportunity. It gives us an even bigger reason to be inspired and to think about how we can play in this space. Cities where these kind of bikes really have taken off include Amsterdam. If you've been to Amsterdam, you'll know that it's, along with the rest of the Netherlands, just a place where people are bike crazy for good reason. And there are many benefits to that. And people have integrated the bike with personal mobility on many levels. We also see in Denmark, there are great examples of mobility. And this bike, for example, was designed in Copenhagen, a city also very well known. If you've not been there, it's worth a visit. Lots of bikes if you go around the downtown of Copenhagen. Growth is another important driver. And we're not only talking about economic growth or economic development, we're speaking about efficient urban mobility in this space. As we've heard in the previous presentation and what Amanda was touching on previously as well, there is more activity in our cities. There is growth happening in terms of population, in terms of the expediency of delivering goods and services. So efficiency really is key, and we see there is demand for more efficient goods movement in cities as more and more people compete for that space where the robots go, where the cars should not be going, where we go, and where the bikes for personal use are also going. So that is another area where I think a lot of our attention is focused. And then also policy. We see a lot of growth in non-motorized transportation policy in different cities, and Calgary is no different. We're not immune to that. The future of transportation definitely on a policy level is moving towards greater integration of e-bike policies that are driving the kind of implementation we see in how people interact with bikes on a day-to-day space, how they can cut GHG emissions in the process and create a healthier and friendlier environment for how our goods are moved. Then another driver into electric cargo mobility really is by industry, and that is wonderful to see because industry is where most of these changes happen. A lot of the R&D that we see is applied by industry, and many of our delivery companies, be it Purolator or FedEx or others, they are the ones that make use of this. They are the ones who help us to see this momentum out there that we see every day. So one thing I want to touch on is mobility as a service, or MaaS as it's called, and that really is something which also is an opportunity to include really, you know, what we see around here, the kind of futuristic things in the center, because mobility as a service is a new way of thinking around mobility, using apps to book vehicles, maybe for a single use, or otherwise, and being able to pay seamlessly as long as we have interoperability between the different back-end systems and the vehicle that you are using for a specific time frame.
Thank you.
There are also some barriers. As with most things that we see around electric mobility, there are a couple of challenges, and we need to acknowledge those. So one of them is the user experience. In many cases, there was a question from someone or a comment previously about some autonomous vehicles that had an accident in Ontario. That is a user experience. And similar with e-bikes, there are a couple of risks around human safety and the safety of goods, especially if you are transporting fragile goods. On top of that, we've got the common questions around electric mobility, which is range anxiety and the charging network. So as we are experimenting in this space, it would be very useful for us to think about how to address those two issues. And I know within our team, we are thinking about this a lot. Strategically, how to reduce that range anxiety so that we can create a positive conditions for user experience to be improved. And the same with charging networks, because those go hand in hand. If you're not able to keep the e-bike on the move, then you will have a couple of challenges. Also related to that is the infrastructure question. In some cases, we need to rethink our land uses, signage. Maybe it's useful to think about hubs, where one can operate some of these bikes from. There's a picture I'm going to show you a bit later where hubs of electric mobility are really enabling the success of this kind of e-bike business model. But it really is about systems thinking. It's about networks, it's about hubs, and then having the complementary land use that comes with that. And relating to the previous presentation as well, we have to look at the political economy around electric mobility. And with that, I mean social perceptions, public acceptance. In some cases, it may be that we need a bit more communication with the public to create the understanding about where the benefits are for some folks in Calgary to make use of these bikes. In terms of policy and vision and regulatory frameworks, there is always more work to do. As we know, innovation is something which happens organically, and relating to what Travis mentioned as well, with some technologies, one moves back a step, you take 2 steps forward. And that is just the territory on which we see these things happen. So with that, one needs to have a certain degree of flexibility within policy and regulations.
Great. Okay, so we have a good background of the why this is happening and some of the enablers and barriers to it. So now let's look at this in practice. We can start with the evolution of e-cargo bike policies to help further explain that why.
So if we think about, or maybe a question, if you know, put up your hand. Who knows when the first cargo bike was used? This is not your general kind of dinner table question, but does anyone know how old is the cargo bike? If you don't, no pressure.
150 years.
Close, but very optimistic. But apparently, according to research, in 1923, the first commercial cargo bike was put onto the road. It was not in Calgary, sadly. So the cargo bike is nothing new. We've seen it around for over 100 and something years. And over a century, there's been a lot of experimentation. So policy promotion pre-2010, I just called it pre-2010 because it's an easier frame of reference. We've seen a new kind of civic development of new technologies. And because of population growth in cities since 1923, there has been a lot more interest in bikes. So there's naturally been also a lot of different options. People were experimenting. And just like we are today, we are thinking increasingly how can we make cargo bikes more efficient, more useful, more user-friendly, more comfortable, convenient. We think also about short-term actions. In some cases, technologies around this kind of bike development, we need to think in short-term steps in order to reach the bigger steps later. So short-term thinking is very useful for this kind of experimentation, but ultimately, if you look back at the last 100 years of cargo bike usage, the goal has always been mobility. That's been the end use. And different steps were taken to reach that. With technology changing all the time, some short-term actions are seen as, well, hey, this doesn't work. So we try something else. Also, delivery patterns have changed. We can see the reconfiguration of that as we have different developments around the city happening with street design, street policy, and just people's behavior. So that kind of very quick overview tells us that the policy promotion since 1923 has only grown, and looking ahead, it will only grow a lot more, and that is where folks like Amanda and myself come in. Looking at more or less 2011 to 2020, there is a growing rise globally for having policies that consider noise reduction. People want to feel zen when you live in a busy environment. This provides zen if you are feeling overwhelmed. Refined targets and policy directives are also very common. If you look at other cities, if you look at also federal research that's come out, there is a constant tweaking and refining of certain policy interventions, targets about how many e-bikes in a certain space can be safe or should be considered. So policy and regulations really helping to balance out where industry may be a bit slow or a bit too quick. The rise of mass market e-mobility options is happening. As we see with the electric car, the passenger vehicle, the numbers of adoption, or if you look at the numbers of how many people are driving e-vehicles, is increasing. There may be a few market bumps along the way, but the trajectory is on the up. We also see in many different cities, especially here in Canada, land use efficiency is a big driver. So that is a very critical area in which to think about how to incorporate cargo bikes. And there's a lovely picture there of a little trike with some kind of, don't know what that is, but I suppose one can use that for various deliveries, maybe even take a nap inside it if you want a stand-up nap, if you can. And then if we think about the current state, we are seeing the acceleration of e-bike adoption. In many cities, I mentioned Copenhagen, I've mentioned others, we've heard about Toronto, but even here in Calgary, there is a sense of acceleration of e-bike adoption required to address the needs of delivery of goods and even people. There are more and more solutions coming up to close the gaps and the barriers to adoption. People are thinking very innovatively about how can we address safety, how can we address sidewalk safety. We had a case recently hearing of someone who went over a bump on a sidewalk, and the bicycle was damaged. This was not with a cargo bike, just a personal bike. So that makes you think, you know, if we are delivering goods, you know, smooth surfaces are important. So there's more attention being paid to these kind of things. Then also, very importantly, to tie this back to the times that we live in, alignment of climate goals and priorities with innovative zero emissions goods movement is really something that drives a lot of the policies we have today, and also the progress we see in industry is also conversely driving some of the policy tweaks that we've seen around electric mobility. And this is the picture I was referring to. There we've got a BMW, I think it's an i3 if I'm not mistaken. There is a cargo bike, there is a motorized bike, and there are a couple of other e-bikes, all within a hub. And I think this is somewhere in the UK. I found this picture, I've seen it a few times, but it really tells a wonderful story of how electric mobility hubs can build our communities. And you have goods movement delivery options right there. You've got personal mobility of different choices. This is an example of sustainable mobility options in practice in a neighborhood.
Great, thank you. So as you can see from these pictures and all the other ones that we've had beforehand, there are certainly a range of different bike options and e-cargo bike options. So when we look at technology, to simplify the differences between them, we can think about e-cargo bikes as being placed on a spectrum, where what shifts along this spectrum is the number of wheels the bike has, the type of commodity that is transported, and also the typical payload that a bike can have. And so payload is it references the weight that a bike is towing in addition to its rider. And it's quite significant. So I recommend that you pay attention to this slide, because I am going to be asking you a couple of questions about how these bikes might operate in practice in the next slide. Okay, so on the spectrum, if we look at the e-bike on the far left side, so this is where we have conventional bikes, e-bikes that are fitted with baskets or racks. And what's suitable here, if we think about the types of commodities that are going to be transported here, this is something that you would see most likely in use with a personal vehicle. So an individual who's commuting about their daily lifestyle, what are they transporting with it? And most commonly what you will see are groceries. So I needed to go get 3 items from the grocery store. This is a really great option for that rather than jumping in my car. In my neighborhood, I see these styles of bikes most often being used to transport children, and they are fitted in so many different ways as ways to actually protect children from weathers, including complete weather screens and tops to prevent rain and snow from getting at them. And then lastly, from the commercial angle, this style of bike can be really good for moving around small electronics or mail. But as we step up on this spectrum, where the e-trike comes in, so with the addition of another wheel, higher battery wattage and capacity, and a larger box, the payload potential changes quite significantly. And this is what makes them more suitable for commercial uses. So what I actually forgot to say is on the conventional side, the two-wheeled e-bike, the payload there, you're likely able to carry an additional 100 pounds of weight when you are moving with the conventional style of bike. With the e-trike, you're able to carry up to 700 pounds just as it is. But if you add a trailer with it, then you can get even more weight on it. So from the commercial standpoint, what's really great to move here is where we have business-to-business deliveries, such as moving product between a retailer and a store, or a warehouse and a store, or even moving meals between restaurants can be a really great use case for using the e-trike. Other uses are where we have more Amazon-style uses, where Amazon has centralized mini hubs that they use to shift consumer parcels from their hubs straight to commuters' doors. So that's how the technology works and how it ranges along the spectrum. In practice, we have a company here called Cornucopia Logistics. They operate out of a very well-known and dense American city, and their whole fleet is 100% e-bikes. So this is an e-bike with a backloaded box and also supported with an additional trailer. So if you were to guess, like, take a moment to really think about a logistics company and what they might be helping to move around the city. What do you think is moving around on this bike? Any guesses? Just shout them out. Okay, food. Groceries. Yeah, great guess. Anything else?
Office supplies.
Fantastic. Okay, and where do we think it is? I think it's a well-known, very dense American city. New York. Perfect. All right, and how heavy do you think their payload is?
It's filled with puff wheat, so 40 pounds.
Great guess. Okay. So you're all right on the money here. So this company is moving groceries in Manhattan, New York City, with an average payload of up to 300 pounds. What's really impressive about this company is that they essentially can move around. They can use one bike to deliver to 5 customers on a route that takes 2 hours, and they're moving around that route. The route size is about 16 kilometers, and that takes them about 2 hours to do. So with the whole company, they can serve up to an average of 12,500 customers per week with a full fleet size of 200 e-cargo bikes, which is quite significant if you think about this as this is a logistics company whose whole operation is with e-cargo bikes. Now we have another company that I will profile here, but don't worry, I'll fill in the gaps for you. What's really interesting about this company is they are using a bike that is very similar to the Larry versus Harry model here, and they do have that front-loaded box. They have they operate in one community serving one style of customer, and that is so they're moving mail, small parcels, and stationery on the University of Washington campus in Seattle. They measure their payload in terms of liters, so this can vary just depending on this size of parcel that they are moving around. But what's interesting about how they're operating is they're operating on a campus space that is typically very pedestrian oriented. So they're operating in a space that can be very difficult to operate with traditional vehicles, such as delivery vans and trucks. And they're doing so in a way that their route is 7 kilometers. They're serving up to 80,000 customers at a time, in a route that will only take them an hour to do. But what's really interesting about how this company is choosing to operate is that it's a mix. So we have e-cargo bikes and vans who are presented in this mix. And so essentially what that says is that working with e-cargo bikes is really not a one-size-fits-all approach. And so when logistics companies are considering this, what's a main draw for them is typically that e-cargo bikes do offer flexibility, especially when we start to consider their performance metrics alongside other traditional forms of freight movement.
So, I'm sure we all know the concept here of time is money. And the picture on the left here is, again, from the US. I think it's also in New York. This is not the full picture, I cropped it, but the point is that this happens in the US too much. The road space is being used as a, what looks like a delivery gone wrong. There are a whole lot of cars parked behind this truck. And it is very difficult for people to move around this truck. And the poor guy who has to do the actual delivery of the boxes looks like he's also having a hard time. And in the meantime, his truck is idling. So he is wasting fuel. He is contributing to pollution in the city. And he's holding up, apparently in this photo, up to 46 cars behind him, who are now also late for wherever they are going. Maybe they also are doing deliveries and cannot get to their destination because of what is happening here. So if we look at this across a number of US cities and even elsewhere, this is the kind of reality that makes goods movement frustrating for a lot of people. So the performance of this kind of bike, as we see in front here, is that you see optimization of operations. And I think that is already something which can help with the social acceptance. And also, you just don't have to spend so much time feeling sorry for the poor guy who's got to pick up all those boxes. There is also, through the use of e-cargo bikes, a very easy win. Nowadays, there is a lot of pressure on companies to have social sustainability indicators and to show that they are contributing to a cleaner, healthier environment. Using an e-cargo bike definitely gets you a win for that, and also creates a good feeling that you're doing the right thing and contributing. Bike-friendly infrastructure is another very important metric that we need to consider. If we think about how to displace that truck with all those boxes onto a bike lane between buildings in a city like Calgary, we need to think about what kind of infrastructure do we need, what kind of infrastructure do we want, and what will be practical to make the e-goods movement and delivery efficient, expedient, and convenient. So in many cities, there is work being done on regulatory frameworks. And interestingly, if one dives into e-cargo bikes and their success, there is always a link between some form of regulatory framework that really drives people's behavior to what would be considered e-goods movement success. So the point is that policy and regulatory frameworks is something that really helps to drive the performance of how effective these vehicles are. And then also related to that is just land use. Again, speaking about hubs, mobility hubs. If we think back to the photo I showed earlier on, having hubs that are dedicated to e-mobility for goods movement may make it easier to avoid a situation like that on the photo where you've got boxes on a public road and being inconvenient for folks.
Yeah, definitely not an ideal situation to deal with. So if we tap into one of the operational efficiency, the benefit side of this by looking at operational efficiency, we can run a comparative performance where we see how e-cargo bikes are operating alongside their more traditional counterparts. So this data does come from a case study that was run in Seattle, Washington, and it compared essentially the performance metrics of all operators who are using e-cargo bikes with other operators who are just using the cargo vans. And so essentially what's seen here, and the big draw of e-cargo bikes, is that they are nimble, they're agile, and they typically can move a lot faster. And they do so by largely avoiding congestion because they have the opportunity to use additional infrastructure that delivery vans don't really have the option to use. So here, what we're seeing is that when using an e-bike, the comparative performance is that e-bikes are spending more time driving than than delivery vans, but they're also spending less time parking on average. And so when we think about their routes and how they're navigating the differences between driving and parking, e-bikes do have more options. Again, they can move on roads, bike lanes, sidewalks, and potentially other infrastructure that might be available in pedestrian spaces, whereas parcel vans are largely, again, only able to operate on roads or in those limited shared spaces that we do have available. What I found interesting, but not surprising when you start to get into the numbers, is that with e-bikes, they are making fewer deliveries per stop, whereas with parcel vans, they do more deliveries on average. But parking is a challenge for parcel vans. When they do park, their delivery drivers are often having to walk a lot farther between where they're parking and where their deliveries are, which can eat into their overall time in dropping off parcels. Whereas with e-bikes, because of the addition of sidewalk infrastructure that they can use, on average, they're parking a lot closer to their destinations, which, when we look at average speed, does lead to faster delivery times for e-bikes in comparison to these cargo vans. But naturally, what's really interesting to think about here is, like, from the urban logistics angle, it does make sense from an efficiency standpoint to consider how e-bikes can supplement their routes, but doing so does put additional safety pressure on pedestrians when e-bikes are operating in spaces that are shared with pedestrians or other road users. So naturally, as Travis has said, as Conrad has mentioned a couple of times, there is a balance to strike here when we think about how e-bikes can operate within the goods movement space.
So, something that keeps our minds busy at public spaces and mobility policy is making sense of it. How do we make sense of this? And we have challenges and we have options. So, needless to say, and very apt for being in the WAVE Center today, research is important, experimenting is important, looking at best practices. Best practices change. Just a caveat there. Something which may have been a best practice 10 years ago may not be a best practice anymore today. So continuous learning is just very important. And as we figure out the questions and the answers that we need to look at research. We need to do local research right here in Calgary. But also look beyond Calgary, where people have done similar things before and where we don't have to reinvent the wheel, excuse the pun. But importantly, having a very steady focus on research and credible research, that's really critical. So that's one piece. Doing the research, doing the planning, doing the thinking, we need time to think. But then once we've done our thinking, once we've done some research, once we have a solid understanding of it, we need to put that into action somehow. So we can look at our corporate processes, be it at the city, be it private industry. Every organization out there has procedures and cultures, ways of doing things. So depending on how we do things will also determine how quickly we adopt or not adopt things like this blue e-bike here. Education and awareness is very important. And at the city, as many of you will know or are involved with yourself, there is a lot of awareness being raised about the kind of city we want to see today, tomorrow, and into the future. A lot of that goes back to speaking with people, making sure we can educate and show our curiosity to other people and listen to people's questions and suggestions about how to improve public spaces and the kind of mobility that intersects with that space. We have options around cooperative hubs. I go back to the photo I showed you earlier on. The best practices nowadays show that to have a bigger uptake of e-mobility, and regardless if we're speaking about small vehicles or larger vehicles, even trucks and buses, we need to think about cooperative collaboration hubs or just dedicated spaces in which, from which we can then distribute these vehicles, whether doing goods movement or moving people. Things that we've seen as well is just updated policies and bylaws. This is a lengthy process because policies and bylaws do not happen overnight. That requires a lot of thinking, a lot of discussion and compromise. But by doing that continuously, we see progress. And then to address some of the key actions, and this is something which is not just for Calgary, this is for whether you are other cities as well, pilot projects. The ability to experiment, the ability to collect local data and to have case studies to show that, yes, this is working and here are the reasons. And this did not go so well, so we'll avoid this in the future. But being allowed to play is critical, and we've seen many other cities having tremendous success by figuring these things out practically. And that also helps us to build a better framework around how to understand the trends that are out there, because we are bombarded with information about, oh, this is the next big thing, or this is the next big thing. It can be a bit overwhelming. So to keep the focus and to find clarity, all of the above help us to understand how to think about the technologies that are available and how to use them and how we fit into this bigger movement that is e-cargo bikes. Then it's important also, from our perspective, to prioritize impact, because ultimately mobility is not so much about the bike itself, it's about people. People are using this bike. They move things. So the experience of using that piece of equipment is the important piece, the impact. And then the flexibility around how we implement this. So we cannot be too rigid around implementing e-cargo bikes. There will need to be some flexibility around which areas in the city it might be best suited for, and under what terms that can happen. And then technology as well. There is so much technology out there. It's always important to have choices and to avoid what I call path dependencies, where you go down one specific road and get stuck on it because things change beyond from what you can see right now. So that also leads me to think about the implementation and the data that we speak about. Learning from our experiences and having our own little arsenal of information about why something works well in Calgary, why something should go ahead or be tweaked is really important. And that is also something where we can, I think, teach and share knowledge. And I think that's so important. So, speaking about policy connections, as a city, we need to have a toolbox of policies. Do we have those tools? Yes, we do. If we look at our climate strategy, that is one of the guiding documents here at the city in order to think about the future of lower carbon emissions and also importantly, zero emissions, and how to get there. So if we think about it by 2030, the climate strategy gives us ambition for 100% of new livery vehicles to be zero emissions. By 2050, which is not that far away, 100% of all vehicles are zero emissions vehicles. And the climate strategy gives us some of the tools to do some of that. We have the Calgary Transportation Plan in its current form, which tells us that 100% zero emissions vehicles by 2050 is important. That aligns with our climate strategy. Reducing transportation operating costs for Calgarians. Critical. Mode shift towards sustainable modes and the reduction in vehicle kilometers per capita. That is also important. And we've got options like this e-bike to help us achieve that. There are also other tools we have, like the goods movement strategy. There is also the Future of Transportation document that guides us how to think about certain things into the future as we try to be proactive around the future of transportation and all the benefits that it brings. So I've mentioned that already, but it's important to think about the sustainable transportation modes for goods delivery. It's part of industrial development, industrial decarbonization, and our industries are important. And as the city works to, maintain the options for innovation in the industrial space and the commercial space, all of this really works together, and we continuously try to improve how we apply these policy connections and create more connections between them.
All right, so to wrap up this presentation on our change reaction, Calgary already has a very well-established multimodal goods movement network. As you can see from this map, the network primarily composes main truck routes, rail lines, and then also hubs that are accessible by plane at the Calgary International Network. So as we are thinking about what is next or what is already here, we're definitely mindful of the fact that operators are seeking additional pathways as to how they move goods through different parts of the city. And this just gives you an idea of how goods are already moving within different quadrants of the city and across different quadrants of the city. And a part of our role as the city of Calgary is that we are enablers. We are enablers of thinking about different ways to help support the pathways that are already here, and we're infrastructure builders. So we do need to be mindful of the fact that these changes are en route, they're coming quickly, and to just sit and do nothing doesn't necessarily help our urban logistics companies or operators in this space continually to operate in ways that tackle social, environmental, and economic good. So we're listening. And Jason, how much time do we have overall?
We're free after this.
Oh, okay. So if you do have additional time to stay around and workshop with us, we do have a couple of questions to think about. How do we do this as a city? Like, we definitely have some really great pathways that are already started, but there's more work to be done. So I guess I'll open up the floor now to just general questions, and then I do have a couple of questions to throw back at you as well.
All right, let's take 2 questions, and then we'll go into workshop if people can stick around. Alessandro.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. It's really interesting and awesome. Just wondering something. How you guys are going to tackle the fact, so it's an e-bike, and the weather in Calgary, as we all know, it's kind of a difficult topic. So are you considering any AI, any implementation of technology? Is there any talk about that, like, I don't know, maybe eating, some sort of eat sensor that can be attached to the e-bike when the e-bike goes around the city? So just how you gonna deal with that? Thank you.
Well, I think the big piece here was that this is industry using the cargo bikes, right? So that would be up to FedEx or Pizza Hut or Bo Cycle to put that on themselves. We're not requiring any AI enabled, or even like, there could be companies doing delivery right now that they don't have to register a cargo bike.
And also what we've seen, there's a company in England called Eve, EAV. They have built a e-bike for cargo where you have that protective screen in front, and you have a bit of a, as far as I can tell, there is an option to keep warm. But yeah, I think if you are driving this in Calgary in the wintertime, definitely one would want to put something, some covering on, and also dress appropriately. But it's being done. It's all about trip planning. If you are applying for a job as an e-goods bike guy or gal, then it's important to dress accordingly, just like you would if you were to take a conventional bike and cycle to work at -42.
One of our presenters this afternoon does e-cargo bike because she does dropping off her kids or family before she comes to work, and she uses studded tires and rides year round. But go ahead.
Yeah, just to tack on to that, we actually do have Purelator, who has operated a pilot already in Calgary, and that was something they had to tackle, was how to move amid snow. I don't have the numbers for it because they weren't released publicly, but we do have driver satisfaction surveys that came out, and generally what drivers said is their delivery routes were not impacted amid snow and cold. And a part of that is that the cycle routes are largely cleared within 24 hours of snowfall, so that's something that the city is already actively managing, recognizing that a lot of people like to maintain their active modes through different times of year. And the people who are going to be riding in winter situations, they're already bought in. Like, they know what it takes to be safe within a winter environment. And again, as a city, as demand is growing, it is essential for us to respond to that in ways that helps maintain that safety.
Sandra.
Just a comment to support your presentation, and particularly on the snow removal or winter considerations. I'm often downtown, and I notice that at the onset of a snowfall, the bike lanes are the first to be cleared before sidewalks, before roadways. And there are so many people using the bike lanes, it is astronomical. And in any temperature of weather, it could be 35, 40 below, and people are still using the bike lanes, and they are well traveled. Yeah.
All right, Dave, and then let's go to workshop.
Hi, excellent presentation, very interesting. Just wondering if you have any other stats that can help us predict adoption. For instance, do you have the stats on like cost per kilometer per volume, cost per kilometer per weight, and then how different technologies, like before e-bikes, manual deliveries versus e-bikes now, and how that brings the cost per kilometer down, and how it compares to things like trucks and roadways. From that type of trending, we should be able to predict when mass adoption is going to happen.
Yeah, we do have that information. I don't have it all on the top of my head right now, but I can definitely provide you with that from our files. But what I want to share with you is that if you look at a common example is studies out of the UK, where an e-bike company looked at exactly this kind of question that you raised about cost. And very often the final mile is the most expensive part of any delivery. So in goods movement, that is going to be the critical piece. If one can decarbonize and, let's just say, make it cost effective, the final mile can really achieve multiple things. And up to 50% in the UK of the final delivery happens, or the cost is associated with that final mile. And of course, if you have different payload opportunities on these bikes, you can then lower that cost in terms of delivery within a neighborhood, and also reduce GHG emissions at the same time. So yeah, I can send you more details, but ultimately, yes, the final mile is the expensive piece, and that's where our focus definitely should be.
Great. Okay, we'll get to your questions. And Brindis Whitson, a logistics guru, is in the audience. So I'm hoping for some insightful answers from you, Brindis.
Okay. You said Bridget? Brindis? Okay, I'm just going to put you on the spot then. So, so just generally, what brought you here today, and like, why are you interested in this topic?
So part of the reason I was really interested in this topic was more because of how does goods kind of interact throughout the city, but also how do we make sure that kind of we're utilizing the space correctly too. And also the one thing that really came up a lot as I was looking and listening to both of these topics has been how do we involve urban planning in all of this?
Okay, so thank you for that answer. That definitely does seem to be a bit of a gap in how we involve different players within this space. So I'll open up this question more generally. What additional gaps are you seeing either in how to invite more e-cargo bikes or how to get the additional players and actors together? It's a big question, I know, but no wrong answers.
I think people want to hear stories. They want to hear
Yeah.
success stories, right? So when you have that pilot, or, you know, like there's a guy on Twitter, Maticus. He's a realtor photographer, and he uses his cargo bike to get everywhere from you know, I was going to say Panorama Hills, but that's not the suburbs anymore. But right, and he uses it all over, right, to get from east to west, and so following his social media timelines, you get to see the success stories, and I think we want to see more of that. How, whether it's a spice company in Inglewood to a food delivery, we want to see that other people are making it work, and then then we want to make the investment as a company. I'll go to Christina.
I was going to say, it seems like most of your work is focused on city. Hi. Most of your work seems to be focused on enabling private industry to use e-cargo bikes and making sure the infrastructure is in place and our policies, et cetera. But what about the use of this for us internally? So with the city of Calgary, like administration. We have, like, this is just like a very small example, but we use like inter-office mail. I see that still being done by light duty fleet vehicles. So just wondering if we're using it internally, and that could be an example to test our systems and use the data that way.
Yeah. Those are two really great comments. Like one, like we definitely have to humanize the technology to help promote adoption, and then also potentially be the leaders of the technology use to show that it does work. Yeah, really great example.
Okay, Sandra, I'm coming. We have a cargo bike here that was part of just IT's fleet, so we've commandeered it, and so we've used it to we've attached a camera on it and used it to film fences along pathways, and we'll use it to carry gear back and forth to a platform while we're there. But we haven't had a space to keep it, and then we don't all have access to the basement here, so we're hoping to use it more. And then there's a whole fleet of bikes down there that we can use that have been locked up forever, but now that we've got space, they're open for people to use. Sandra, and then I'll go back.
To attract commercial enterprise adoption, it has to be a solid business case. And because right now, if I'm a logistics company or a company that relies on delivery of goods, I'm looking at that bike as a capital cost, and it's a depreciating asset. And now I also have to hire someone to be able to deliver. So now I have additional cost with human resources, human capital. And then also taking a look at what kind of goods do I deliver that, because now I have a restricted payload as opposed to a larger commercial vehicle. So there's a lot of different moving parts, and it also depends on the type of business, the payloads they're delivering, who they're delivering to, where they're delivering to. So there's a lot of different moving parts to be able to convince commercial enterprise to adopt e-bikes. And the delivery, no pun intended, is in the data. The more, excuse me, the more data you have to support various different business cases, that's where the adoption, that's where the adoption can be attracted. Thanks.
Yeah, that's definitely a very good point. And you really make I think you clarify the reality of many companies out there. So what we've seen at least is that a mixed fleet of delivery vehicles, including things like this, make it possible to offset some risks. If you were to think about it, if you are only operating e-bikes, it might be difficult as a logistics company. But if you have an e-van and you supplement with an e-bike, or you have an e-trike, that can be a way to minimize certain business risks, and also maybe to think about where your deliveries are taking place. If you don't need to use the van, you can use an e-bike. So it depends on the customer base you are serving. And in different cities, we've seen this kind of mixed fleet to be very cost effective and to be a way to grow the fleet. You experiment with maybe one e-bike, and then if it really works well, you buy another one. So the road to cleaner delivery is often done through various vehicles within the same logistics company.
Just a quick note on cost. So this Larry versus Harry bike is very expensive. So as of right now, it's selling on sale for $8,300. So that's definitely not a consumer model, and from a commercial standpoint, it's a pretty hefty investment. But as this technology has started to grow, the entry cost has decreased quite significantly. And we have new bike manufacturers in the space that are making more affordable bikes that do yield similar performance to this one here. So just something to think about on the business case side of things.
Okay, we've got one more question here. If you want to stick around and ask more or have more engaging conversation, we're happy to do so after, if you two have time. And then we're kicking back up at 1 o'clock with Jen Moser. But I'll pass it over to you for one last question.
Thank you. So mine is one a question and the other one a comment related to the business case. So the question being is, I wonder, this map is very interesting. I wonder if this goods movement route conversation has been done with, let's say, transit or REDS for the city, because I want to understand if transit is planning on some BRT lines on this. So we have to do a cost-benefit analysis to understand which kind of infrastructural investment will be more beneficial, a BRT line versus an infrastructure for moving cargo e-bikes, for example. And then REDS also can be an important place to investigate, because if you're thinking about housing, if you're thinking about residential development of density, these kind of movement makes more sense if you have more dense environment. So is these conversations happening? And the second piece is around operationalizing. If we have operators and logistic companies, like you mentioned, Purelator and FedEx, is there a demand that you're seeing that they're requesting municipalities to make infrastructural changes and investments? Is there consultations going on with these private entities? Because end of the day, I think the demand, it's a council-driven organization, so the demand will lead to infrastructural change. So yeah.
Very good points, Titesh. Thank you. So on what you say about transit-orientated development, I think that definitely is very important. So what I can say is that if we think back to the picture I showed with all the different policy documents that we are trying to integrate to get action on the ground, yes, we are chatting with Reds. Yes, we are chatting with people over at Transit. But I think what's interesting at the City of Calgary, and it's similar in other cities, different teams have different levels of pace at which they can do certain things. So the coordination of all of this is really quite important. And it's a longer conversation, but I think it's a classic case of governing for long problems and getting an e-bike onto a road that fits in with the kind of strategies that Reds is using and looking at the TOD policies. Coordinating all of that requires a bit of time, but to answer your question, yes, we are having those conversations, but are always welcome. We always welcome more conversation because we don't have all the answers. You have ideas, you have vision and suggestions, so please speak to us because every, not step of the way, every roll of the wheel helps.
Right. And for our non-city or folks here and online, real estate and development services when we reserve to Reds. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you both so much. You guys can stick around if you'd like. And yeah, we'll just mingle. We do, again, take a walk around. We're here. Some of us will be grabbing lunch before we start at 1, but get a tour, meet the team, chat with everybody. And if you have any more questions, we're around. Thanks. Thank you. Really excited to bring Jen Malzer to you all and online. Like I said, some of the coolest spaces you see in Calgary, Jen's probably had a hand in them. So, Jen, I'll let you introduce yourself a bit, but we're looking forward to seeing what today's all about.
Awesome, thanks. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm one of 2 presenters that you should have today. My colleague Cam had a family emergency today, so you'll get just half of us, but a big shout out to her for thanking me. Get ready for today. Today we're going to talk about transportation, and we're going to talk about disruption, innovation, ideas, and how we go about it when we do have ideas that are maybe a little out there or just not the regular practice. And so how can you just generally be more effective when you do have ideas? And we're going to sort of flip back and forth between transportation and ideas innovation, and the ideas that we knew we were first up after lunch, which is definitely the worst time slot. So please do participate, just at least to make me feel better that you're at least awake. So say you want a revolution. So we also wanted to start, this is a new space to us, new space to the team. We wanted to know who was in the room. So if we could just do a quick hands up survey with, please, where does everyone in the room come from? So do you come from tech? At least half, more than half, 3/4. Okay, tech, that makes sense. Planning. Not so much engineering, a little bit of planning, more engineering, and any students? No students, maybe online. Storytellers, yes. Hopefully we're all storytellers, but a couple of us self-identifying. Okay, and then we wanted to just have a little bit of fun because, again, it's after lunch. Star Trek, Star Wars versus Harry Potter. Where do we stand on this very critical topic? I'll give you a moment to reflect. Star Wars, yes? Or Star Trek. Star Trek. I will go Star Trek. You can be in multiple camps, too. I don't know that it has to be mutually exclusive. Star Wars. Okay, as expected. That's a crowd pleaser. And Harry Potter. I'll put my hand up for this one, too. Yeah, very good. Okay, so we also then wanted to start us out with what idea are in the room. Does anybody have anything a little bit out there that you may be a little nervous to say out loud, but you're going to anyway, that we can sort of consider to kick off this 1 p.m. conversation? So what ideas are you sitting on? Are you actively trying to advance that could be fun? Surf wave, yes. Who doesn't love a good surf wave? Anybody else? Yeah.
So there's a Smart Cities NEOM out of the United Arab Emirates.
What is that? Tell me what it is.
Within the desert, they're building a smart city, and it's completely connected and very tactile. I don't know all the details, but I'm intrigued, and I'm wondering, what does it take to bring it here?
Billions of dollars, but no. Okay, and so you'd love to bring that here as a new city or to incorporate into? Incorporate, love it, yes. Okay, so learning. Any other cool ideas that, by the end of my career, I'm going to accomplish with a team? Anybody? Okay, Christopher.
A fully comprehensive digital twin of the city.
A digital twin of the city. Cool, what's that?
Where every element within a city is captured virtually as well, where it's like every road, pipe, street light, even everything else, so you could explore the city virtually, so that way you don't have to explore it as in having to do field inspections, and if you have something new coming in, you'd be able to easily identify if there's any conflicts or how it looked like in the space.
Okay, amazing. I feel like we have such good tech that we do already have this, but maybe not. Maybe that's way more than LiDAR, it sounds like. Okay, amazing, I love it. Any last ones? Yeah, 1 second.
I have a digital map of downtown with everything already on it and a layout of the whole city. And it takes 22 megs, so you can carry it with you and look like you are very knowledgeable.
Quick reference guide. Awesome, I love it. Okay, which one did we run a run with, or do we keep them all? So let's start with, okay. Oh, thanks. Let's go with, what do we think? Digital twin for Calgary? What are we going to call the digital twin? Edmonton. Okay. All right. Let's keep that in mind. So we want to get this digital twin called Edmonton. And that's actually the perfect name, because along your journey to build this digital twin, it may not be totally seamless and smooth. We may have setbacks. People may not agree. Yes?
Calgary Prime.
Okay.
No, I'm going to say no, because not every idea has every supporter. And so I actually love that name comes with baggage. Is that okay? Or maybe we're still in the naming phase and we have many on the table, but we have to land a name. Okay, so let's talk about, we have ideas. We all have ideas, even if we didn't admit to them today in this room, knowing that this was going to be recorded and we're too embarrassed. Every one of us has ideas, or we live with people with ideas. And it could be just, I'm going to make something a little bit weird for Saturday night, but you're going to invite people. And those people may have different appreciation of your menu or your crazy idea. So who are the people in a room and how might they react? And what does that matter? And so when we think about ideas and people coming to experience your idea, you say it out loud to a room of people, you're going to have a range of reactions. You're going to have, this is a model from, it's a normal distribution model, so many in the room will already know the curve itself. But it's also a great way to lay out how people approach ideas. And so the people on the left of this rendition of a normal distribution really, really love your idea. They love it right away. And sort of in the middle, they may or may not, they have some enthusiasm and a little bit of reticence, but you might be able to get them along. And then you got some folks at the end, and we don't like to use the word laggards anymore, but they have some concerns. So, and this, if you get a big enough population, you're going to get people with all of these perspectives reacting to your idea. So let's just apply it and try to internalize what it means. Because if you want to get a surf wave, or you want to bring a city from the United Arab Emirates to Calgary, you're going to need to convince some folks. So let's talk about this from the sense of e-scooters. Now, think back to, I think it was 2019, Calgary was finally getting e-mobility devices. We were getting e-bikes and e-scooters. Where do you think you landed on this spectrum in terms of innovator, early adopter, late to the game? Yeah. Not in the game. You were not going to try an e-scooter. Why is that? Yeah, they're dangerous. Why would you try something that's dangerous? That makes zero sense.
And a lot of people, I used to work in clinical neurosciences and also in the brain injured unit. And a lot of people, they avoid wearing helmets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people don't take the proper precautions, and it's dangerous, and you know firsthand what the dangers can mean. So you're not getting on board. Who about somebody who did get on board? Yes.
I think I'm an early adopter.
An early adopter. How do you know?
I didn't help put in the scooters.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't work out the kinks.
Mm-hmm.
I just hopped on and
Yeah,
went and
you were
scared a whole bunch of
super
people.
keen as soon as the system was in place.
That's right.
Love it. Anybody who felt they were an innovator? We'll see it in the next one, maybe. Okay. Anybody who was a little bit reticent but now has fallen in love? Yeah, Jason. You've fallen in love with the e-scooter?
Yes. You don't see anybody on them that doesn't have a smile, and I wanted to smile too.
That's right. Yeah, so you waited for the data. Cool. All right, one more example, if I can get this to move this way. Come on. Okay, what about virtual working? So working from home. We all sort of had to do this. Anybody who was an innovator?
I've worked from home for 25 years.
For 25 years, before this was even known, you knew how to do it. How did you get there?
I never worked for companies that were here in Calgary, so I had to have, I created my own office.
Yeah, it was a necessity, it was a priority. You really liked the work, so you made it work.
And I would really have a hard time moving back into an office.
Yes, and you're never going back.
Never going back.
Anybody on the other end of the spectrum from not an innovator, but really holding back? I am. I like to see people in person in 3D. Did anybody switch from the last topic to this topic? Like move from one end of the spectrum to another? You did? Did that surprise you?
Yeah, because I'm like the other lady, I'm not getting on an e-scooter.
Yeah, so I think we often think that depending where we may be, if I'm an innovator or Jason or Keith is an innovator on one topic, that they're always an innovator. And it's not necessarily related to that, right? It's really intrinsic to something that makes sense to you, or it's an idea that has data to back it up, that it really works, that kind of thing. Let's explore one more quickly. Food delivery. Who's on board with food delivery and who's not? Sure.
Oh, just think it's very convenient to have food delivery. Smiles to me.
Yeah.
Expensive. Why not?
Yeah, why not? All the benefits.
Yeah, like it. Yes.
Cool.
Probably more efficient to do delivery than all those cars on the road.
Nice. Yeah, thanks. Again, anybody switch on this category compared to another one? Yes.
I found I've been really resisting delivery for the environmental cost and what am I going to do with all these bloody containers for label?
Yeah. So there's some tangible downsides. So say you're a food delivery company and you wanted to pitch that this is a really good approach. It's efficient. Why not? People like it. If you want to attract customers or folks to onboard your idea, to make it legal, to make it to attract drivers, you have to maybe work through different kinds of key messages to land your idea with different groups. And I think that's where innovation can come in and help. We're going to pause on this part for a second, unless anybody has any other comments that they want to bring up. Yes, please.
With e-scooters, I realize I'm a laggard because I've never tried it and I don't want to try it. I'm in the same category. But I was also an innovator because I was aware of the technology. I was talking to companies that were starting it. And so it was this halfway, like, I'm a laggard, but also I guess I was an innovator.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you may think an idea is great and good for a population or a certain demographics, but it's not for you. We don't always do things for ourselves. Yeah, thank you. That's a great insight. Any other last insights? Okay.
When you
Yeah.
mentioned working from home versus in the office, I do miss taking my bike and riding down to the office.
So that's another point of, say, this particular idea takes away some other benefits. And that's often when we think about the late adopters, is there's something that they're giving up. And so is there another way that you can work from home, but you know what, we're going to make it easier for you to pick up your kids by bike or take bike trips in another way so that you're still getting the benefits you have today. And that's really important with landing ideas. Okay, so now we have a quick video about change in transportation. Okay. That's a great video. Shows a lot of changes in a pretty tough place with a lot of folks. Any thoughts on how easy or hard those changes were to make? Christopher.
It's easier for the plazas because you have so many people there already. It's easier to fill up that space compared to somewhere where we have to implement that in like a low-density suburb. It would be tougher to kind of activate that space as much just because you don't have the people to support it.
Right. Okay. So, whereas the people might make it harder because they might be afraid, at least they're there to enjoy it and see the results right away. Yeah. Great point. So Cam and I showed that video because those are the kinds of changes that she and I at least hope to be involved with. I don't know, or maybe not at the New York scale, but the Calgary scale. And yeah, it really does take working with a lot of different perspectives, different people. And you can imagine that we would have different messages and what else might we be doing to make these kinds of changes?
Considering that, like, all those shots were of New York in the summertime, and how do we do that same kind of activation in the winter and become more like Montreal and that winter city that they've become?
Yes, yeah, or Winnipeg. I have to shout out to my birth home. They do great winter activation, but that's a good point. I mean, we have our construction season, and people do want to sit outside and really relax in the summer. But often we don't finish our projects till the end of September. So how do you make people keep the faith that by the next summer it's going to be a grand place? And so I think some of the materials they used were really quick, so you could get that change more immediately. Yes?
And I mentioned this in the prior presentation. The one thing that I noticed that the city of Calgary does in order to make the bike lanes much more accessible and be utilized even in the winter time, regardless of when it snows, the amount of snow. The city crews are out there clearing those bike lanes, and they're the first ones to be cleared before city sidewalks and the roadways.
Yeah, thanks for that. We have amazing crews, and they work in a really coordinated way so that they actually clear the sidewalks and the bike lanes at the same time, so all the snow gets picked up at the same time, because we actually clear the snow, remove it from the downtown. So yeah, thanks for that shout out, because they are awesome. Any other thoughts? Yeah, please.
I think people during the construction period of time, or as they're leading up to it, that's where the most kind of adversarial kind of feelings are. But once it's done, then people are like, oh, look at this, it's lovely. It's like the construction period never happened. They just have to get through it.
Yes, sometimes. Sometimes we still get calls from, I mean, not everybody is going to have the same opinion, but hopefully if we design and build and operate properly, then we'll have a lot more happy customers. Okay, so we're going to go back from sort of transport, as I promised, Cam and I were going to flip back and forth a bit between transportation, the world we live, and then just in general, like, how do you land ideas? So we're going to do something, again, interactive. We have a few Jeopardy questions, and I'm sure everybody knows the game of Jeopardy. I'm going to give you the answer, and then you hopefully can guess what the question is, and then talk through a different sort of innovation topic. So this first answer is a common change management curve, and hint, hint, you may have already seen it, that describes many patterns, including how ideas typically land in regular populations. Yes.
Standard deviation.
Yes. Yeah. Normal distribution. So normal distribution or diffusion of innovation. So I know we've already talked about this, but it's a model that has been around, I think, since the late '60s. I want to say '68, and is just really a great one to make sure that you're talking with different folks from across the spectrum. There's a lot of different biases in innovation work, and some kind of forms of bias are around just working with people who think the same as you. So I think it's really important to step back and say, am I talking with folks who are on board and definitely not on board, who are or those in the middle who maybe don't know about, to tease out what are some of the questions you might need to answer and data you might need to collect. And also just to get a sense of how ready is your organization. A good line that I heard at a conference was, every public sector employee needs to have that top drawer of ideas where you have these ideas, but they're not, the timing is not now. You don't have the right partner. The city or council is not it's just not the right time for that idea. So you put it in the drawer, and then you get sort of a shape or a timing or a set of circumstances, a funding source that is right, and then it's time to open the drawer and move that idea. So you have to know where people stand and are the conditions right. Okay, so this one is really near and dear to my heart. So if you want to change or do something different, you may need to evaluate it. You may need to show and measure that something is in fact a good idea before you do it, and then especially after you've done it. So close to this is analytical philosophy, that you achieve only what you need. Hopefully, but that's not the answer or the question.
Pilot?
Not pilot. Measure, yes.
Oh.
Yes. So if you're measuring the wrong things that may not be connected to your goals, your aspirations, the things that you measure are the things that you keep top of mind, are the things you report back to at council. Those are the pieces that are pulling your efforts. So if you are measuring what really, really matters, that is a great way to pull you towards making the difference you want. So I work with folks around safety, and so we really want to be measuring things like, are we lowering the speed limits? Are we creating conditions that are safe? And just to dig into that one a little bit more, if we do a project, we relatively at a particular intersection, probably there's not, without sounding insensitive, that many intersections at that intersection, or it may take a time to reveal a new pattern. But we may have some leading indicators like are cars going fast or are cars going slow that will tell us over time that there's going to be more or less accidents. And sorry, I shouldn't say accidents because they're not. Crashes or collisions. And so it's really being thoughtful about what is it the things that you're talking about and what are the things that you're measuring to make sure you're moving towards where you really truly want to be. And so we did a project with the University of Calgary we did this sort of 8,000 paper scan of the different metrics that are out there when it comes to transportation in communities, and really trying to find those leading indicators that tell us whether we will or are doing a good job when it comes to street design. And so for us, if the street is narrow, cars are going to slow down, there's going to be fewer accidents. I said it again, it's terrible. Another indicator, if there are bike lanes or wheeling lanes, we know when we build bike lanes, it's safer, the street becomes safer for everybody. Pedestrians, people driving. Another one is around green streets, lots and lots of benefits when we can make more space for trees and other things that grow. Okay, so I think this may be the last one. So when you're landing a new idea, disruptive solution, facts don't change this important human ingredient.
What are opinions?
Opinions, super close, yeah. Yeah.
Feelings?
I could take opinions, yeah. Somebody say feelings?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I still don't. Was it you that said it? Oh, thank you. Okay, yes, feelings. Facts don't change feelings. Opinions is just a different expression of feelings, so we can go with that. And so storytelling, I know that's come up today, is really important often when we go into communities, say, hey, we're here, the City of Calgary is here, we have the opportunity to invest in your neighborhood. You may not be familiar with the problems of your neighborhood. They may not be problems to you. But when we can express there's a safety concern, and by the way, your neighbors let us know about it. By the way, your neighbors feel really strongly about it. That's a better way to have a conversation. So really trying to incorporate the feelings of those around us, making space for it, in addition to having the data to show that we really did achieve what we intended to. Okay, and then we'll just get a little nerdy around transportation and how we design for people walking and biking in Calgary. So when we talk about bike lanes across Canada, the expression a lot of cities are landing on is AAA or AAA infrastructure. But in Calgary, we have 2 extra A's, which is better. 5 is better than 3. Okay, so here's that was my setup. Now here's the actual answer. So while AAA is a common term for user-centered bike design in Canada, this 5A is even more inclusive, expectant of inclement weather. So what are the extra 2 A's? Close, yeah. So yeah, basically it's always available. Always available for all ages and abilities is how we talk about designing for people walking and biking in Calgary. And so we have design principles that help us get to that point. But this was a real turning point in how we design for people walking and biking in Calgary and Canada. So my favorite example, so transportation engineers around the 60s, 70s made some assumptions that nobody wanted to walk, or especially to industrial areas, or bike to here or there. And so we started omitting certain elements. And then as we ran out of practice designing for people walking and biking, we made our best guess. And some of our best guesses were quite terrible. So 16th Avenue North, in the very, very early 2000s, we designed, if everyone's familiar with that, with the Trans-Canada through sort of the inner city segment, that street is actually designed for people biking because the curb lanes are a very comfortable 4.3 meter lanes, 4.3 meters. And so as we sort of guessed with some of these new designs and found that, oh wait, there's zero uptake, because in fact, that's not what's comfortable to human beings, we started designing and consulting around, well, what are the conditions that actually are comfortable for you to walk and bike? And now we have council-approved design principles that help us down that path. So we know that communities and parks have different contexts, and so designs are going to vary by context, by the number of people there. But generally, people want to be separated from cars. Generally, people want to be able to have signposts so they know where they're going. So we have these network principles, and that was a really important moment, I think, in Canada and other places, to really put the user first. And that's really important to me. And I think in any design that we do, not just in transportation, is actually thinking about what is it that the customer wants. And it seems so simple, and yet it doesn't always happen. So when it comes to any disruption, that's probably the most important thing. Okay, I lied. We have one more. This is my second and favorite. It's very simple, change model. So the name of a common change model, also known as a piece of freshwater ice, more than 15 meters long, broken off a glacier, or an ice shelf floating freely in open water. Yeah, okay, I'm hearing a whisper. The answer is iceberg. So the iceberg model, it's a good representation, or I use it as kind of a checklist to say, okay, are we actually doing this idea that maybe council told us to? Where are we as a group or an organization when it comes to adopting this thing? How am I for time? I'm just, good. Okay, I do want to respect my, okay. And so I started working in an area called tactical urbanism, and so that's where you do little pilots to test things out. And so you may think, okay, we did one and it turned out well, therefore we're doing it in Calgary. Well, that is not true. We may have some singular events that can maybe change people's perceptions and maybe open the door a little bit, but that's all it is. Until you can go down this full iceberg, you haven't adopted this new thing. And so where you may have an isolated event that Jen did something, well, that's not necessarily that important to that many people. But then you get other people doing it, and it becomes a pattern, it becomes a trend. You're getting on the way, but your corporation probably isn't there yet. It's really what's below the water that really matters when it comes to embracing a new idea. So are your systems, structures, and then your culture ready for that idea? Have you adapted your permission space? Have you adapted your local laws? Like what are the legal frameworks? And that could be policy or even having the right team in place to really onboard a new idea and way of doing things. Okay, so I am near the end, so hopefully that's good. Okay, so we knew everyone in the room, even if we didn't get to it, has ideas. We wanted to share a few things that we think are worth fighting for. So things we're interested in, Cam, what is the future? How do we design for more e-bikes? When we started out on those network principles, around designing for people walking and biking, we were really focused on separating people biking from cars. But now with more and more things, weird scooters and single-wheeled thingy-bobs going fast, we're talking more and more, how do we separate people biking from people walking? And then e-vehicles are coming, I think. A friend was just taking a driverless vehicle in San Francisco and survived. So who knows? Downtown revitalization is really complex stuff and fun. So Cam's really leaning into that. Curbside, so that's sort of the edge of the sidewalk or street. There's a lot of competition for that space. How do we really thoughtfully decide how to use it? And then having more of a seasonal paint the pavement program. So that's, when we talk about structures and to support ideas, do we have a good application process when residents want to paint their street, that it's simple to understand and it's simple for us to process? So I know Paint the Pavement has been really popular and we have some good experience, but how do we make those structures easier? So for me, just trying to get to know users better. We're doing a lot more equity in our infrastructure planning, and we're working a lot more east of Deerfoot, which is exciting. And there's different family structures that are more common, more multifamilies and dwelling units, different school drop-off patterns with more grandparents involved. How do we get to know who we're serving better through conversation and just practice? One of the crazy ideas that I'm excited about is urban gondolas. And I worked on a project just before I had my son, actually. I was trying to improve transit service around the university. And the road network is really complicated around there, and we have the river crossing, and a lot of cities are saying, hey, finally, there's like a mass transit system that's affordable. And so we started looking into it. And I think there's some places in Calgary where it could be a good application. I think piloting more street changes is a good way to approach. It doesn't work on all streets. It just, if we have curbs in the wrong place, it can be too limiting, but can we do some more GIS work? Can we have more of a digital city so we can tease out those streets where we can make those pilots really quickly and make change faster? My line of work can take a really long time to realize projects, so the more we can find those locations that could be good pilots, the more streets we can make safer and more inclusive faster. I love big data. I love hackathons. I love bringing more diverse people to the table, because good ideas are everywhere, and it's just about finding time and ways to get the partners that we need to work together. And then just remembering good ideas. That drawer, keep filling it up with ideas that you see from elsewhere, and think about how something you saw on holiday might be adapted, maybe not in its existing form, but how do we bring more of that Montreal and Winnipeg winter city stuff here, and who do we need to make that really successful? And it's probably a lot of people to make it successful, just like this space, right, Jason? Lots of different folks to make it cool. And I think that's it. So if anybody has any questions or ideas or anything they want to chat about, or Jason, if I'm done, I'm done.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go run around with the mic so people at home can hear. What is the urban gondola?
So when we go skiing on the weekend, we get on a gondola to go up the hill. Well, lots and lots of cities around the world, but not in North America, although Simon Fraser soon is going to actually use gondolas as a form of public transit, because they're easy to build. They actually have huge capacity, and one of the complaints that people have with bus transit is often the frequency can be low depending where you are, but you can have very high frequent surface, and so it's just a gondola, but in a city.
What does Edmonton have to get you from the River Valley bottom to downtown?
It is a funicular.
Yeah, a funicular.
Yeah, but to me it's almost just an elevator, but I could be incorrect. So there's,
what does our digital
I got to
twin
nerd
have?
out a little bit, but there's 4 kinds of sort of cable propelled transportation systems. And really you can have some, like a funicular, they have one in Old Montreal or Quebec City, and it's sort of 2 cars that do this. And so you have, so it's just 2 cars, so you don't have the same frequency. Similarly, in Portland, they have an aerial tram, and so that's also 2 cars between, I think, the bottom of the hill and a hospital at the top of the hill. And they just kind of go back and forth.
Okay. Other questions? All right, Luis.
Hi, Jen. Curious, I'm putting together 2 concepts of measure and feelings. Have you tried measuring feelings?
Measuring, yeah.
I love you this much.
Yeah, so I have 2 answers. I guess we are about to start. We generally do qualitative analysis, but we do want to develop something that will help gather some more of the stories and what is the meaning? Like, when we make these changes, what does it tangibly mean in your life? And so I live along one of the streets that we just improved for people biking, and maybe it's just the timeline on the community, and maybe it has nothing to do with the improvements, but lots more people biking, and it's lots and lots of like dads and little kids, or lots of different kinds of bikes. It's not just one type of person biking. And then we also made improvements to the park, and I love that people are using that space in different ways. So if we just tallied up how many people are in the park at different times, it is useful. But then if we can say, well, there were picnics and soccer, and like, what are the many ways we didn't even design for that people want to do. So we have a great innovation lab, and we were going to do an accelerator with them to come up with a bit more of a guide. But then back to, it's not quite feelings, but I do try to find measures that are compelling. So we don't always gather data around it. Like, what if we were to gather how many calories, or just before the pandemic, we were working more with Alberta Health Services about can we get more data around slips and falls. So we may not be saving city dollars all the time, but slips and falls is super, super expensive. And if we have better sidewalks with better ramps, then we can maybe, save people those slips, and then, so that's not necessarily a feeling either, but something you care about.
But we have seen two other pieces too. Like you've seen where you've put biking infrastructure in and people can feel safer, then that's demonstrated by actually more women cycling. There, you see the greatest increase when you make a pathway safer. You see a greater increase in women feeling comfortable enough. They feel comfortable enough to ride.
Yes.
That one's a really good one. And I think we talk about giving people more choices, whether that's housing or transportation. I think when you make these kinds of investments, you're seeing like people with cargo bikes or people taking their kids to school. They feel more comfortable. They feel they've got more choices. So that's one. The other one is that there's that data study with the U of C on wearables.
That's right, on the wearables.
Right? So their aim is to get 10,000 Calgarians submitting their smartwatch data to the university, and then PhD students and master students there are using that data to explore how it could be used for the city. So you could start to see where people's heart rate goes up at different intersections or at different places along the pathway. So you can start to see how the intersection makes people feel more stressed out, or even their cadence changes on a pathway. So your cadence changes, it could mean that that section is icy or there's a root sticking out, or right? And just all that kind of data, you're starting to get into people's feelings.
Yeah, thank you. I would have forgotten to mention that, so perfect.
Any other questions? All right, I'm coming.
I simply would like to return to their idea of city gondola, and I'm wondering, did you do the estimation of cost? Funicular with the gondola, because I believe gondola is more expensive during construction and also later. So why city gondola?
Yeah, great question. And
Thank you.
the answer is going to be it depends. I love all kinds of transit technologies, and you need the right technology in the right place. But where I think actually gondolas are cheaper is that because you have many, many cars with smaller groups of people, the weight is lower, so the support poles along the route they don't have to be as strong. But if you only have one place to one place, and it's not that long. I think it depends how many customers and so many factors. But generally, gondolas are pretty inexpensive. And that's why South America sort of started the trend, because they couldn't afford to build metro and train.
And the poorest people would live up higher on the mountains.
Yeah.
Where would you put one in Calgary?
Well, I think there's a few spots, but it would be interesting to look at connecting like the West LRT with the Northwest LRT, so the blue and the red lines, so like across the river, or just I think connecting the hospitals to the buses. But anyway, I don't work at Calgary Transit anymore, so.
Yeah, which gives you freedom to talk about
That's
it.
true.
Yeah. Okay, I'd love to see one across the ditch, like going East Village, or not East, East Calgary, right? 17th Ave, downtown, something like that. All right, any other questions? Okay, so it is 2 o'clock. We are right on schedule. So we'll have a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back at 1 o'clock for, you're coming up, right? Awesome. Okay. Jen, thank you so much. We were just saying, there's some texting around our group. You need to come back every week and just have a chat with us here. This is awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We'll chat soon.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Z. I'm the leader of the Mobility Operations Center with the City of Calgary. Today, I'm gonna share some of the interesting projects we have been working on. And hopefully we can have some discussions and how you guys think we should do to improve our traffic. So a little bit background for the MOC, Mobility Operations Center. We are 24/7 operation center, and the city have around 1,200 traffic signals. Around 90% of them is connecting back to the MOC, so our operators can make signal timing changes from their desks. Anytime they found congestion or there's a construction, we need to change signal timing. And also we have 190 PTZ cameras. Those cameras super powerful. They can zoom in, zoom out like a couple kilometers away from certain location. So we have a really good coverage for all the major corridors in Calgary. Once there's a traffic incident happened, we can know what's going on and what's the traffic impact and taking appropriate action on it. And also we have a system, it's an in-house developed system called ATIS, Advanced Traveler Information System. We use the system to get the 911 feed, and also anything happen on the road that impacting traffic will come to us at the same time. Our operator can verify the information, and with one click of the button, we can post the information on Calgary.ca, YYC Transport X account, and also our traffic radio. We also partnership with Alberta Transportation to help them to dispatching, monitoring the traffic condition on their road and tolling. Every year, we respond to 16,000 plus service requests. And if it's an emergency, we dispatch to certain group immediately. There is a video. Okay, it's working. Okay.
Hello and welcome to the City of Calgary's state-of-the-art traffic management center. Founded in 2020, the Traffic Management Center, also known as TMC, is a science resource that uses innovative technology to Calgarians safely on the move. The role of the TMC is to reduce traffic congestion, support emergencies, and traffic flowing safely 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are responsible for traffic monitoring, data management, remote signal time changes, dispatching for emergencies, and providing traveler information for everyone on our roadways. Whether our citizens cycle, drive, walk, take transit, or carpool, the TMC helps improve the life of Calgarians. Calgary has 140 traffic monitoring cameras and 1,100 traffic signals, the majority of which are connected back to the TMC, providing real-time information. This data helps motorists avoid congested areas by providing traffic updates through electronic messaging boards, our traveler information website, Twitter feed, and the city's traffic advisory radio station. We also reduce traffic congestion by manipulating signal timings. Whether it's a planned construction detour or an emerging traffic incident caused by a collision or a major snowstorm, we can manage traffic flow through signal timing. Our top priority is synchronizing signal lights, and with our new second-by-second signal monitoring system, the TMC can rapidly respond to congestion and keep citizens moving during rush hour. Calgary has 4 automated and 2 semi-automated lane reversal systems, which help reduce congestion around Calgary's downtown core. For our semi-automated systems, the traffic management technicians monitor traffic cameras and open and close the gates remotely. Our Traffic Management Center has a maintenance and dispatch hotline where citizens can report any problems they see on the road. This includes everything from identifying potholes to having field crews respond to fallen branches, traffic signal concerns, or emergency road closures. We've also partnered with Waze, a free navigation app that citizens use to report incidents and receive real-time TMC traffic updates. During the winter, the TMC becomes the information hub for our snow and ice control operation, collecting data from our depots and providing regular situation reports to management. The TMC monitors the road network to ensure winter conditions are addressed. They can dispatch crews to respond to high-priority locations and activate external contractors. Our standers have GPS on board, giving us real-time data on the status of our snow and ice control operation. Citizens can also go online to see which routes have been plowed and sanded. During major emergencies, the TMC becomes the Mobility Operations Center and works very closely with the Calgary Emergency Management Agency. The City of Calgary's Emergency Operations Center, the EOC, has access to all the TMC's cameras, so we can become their eyes in an emergency. We also become a citywide dispatch, mobilizing emergency crews in a coordinated effort. In 2014, we worked closely with the EOC to respond to a series of severe snowstorms. 80% of our population was impacted, and snow accumulation caused major disruptions to services. Many communities lost power, and hundreds of traffic signals were disabled. An estimated 500,000 trees were damaged, and debris blocked many roads. We worked with the EOC to fix the traffic signals and get traveler information to our citizens quickly. We are leveraging cutting-edge technology and expanding fiber, broadband, and cellular networks. This has led to substantial improvements in connectivity to traffic signals and sensors. We are also working on implementing 5G technology. One of our most important technology upgrades has been to our advanced traveler information system. As a backbone of the TMC, this system collects real-time information from our traffic camera network, as well as Calgary's 911 and 311 systems. Because of these new technologies, the TMC can relay real-time traffic information to the public and respond to traffic-related incidents up to 80% faster than before. In partnership with Transport Canada, the TMC is currently working on a connected vehicle pilot project and has installed 16 signalized intersections. We are testing a fire truck preemption program that turns traffic signals green before a fire truck arrives at an intersection. We are also developing a test bed for future connected vehicle technologies. This will not only help us test our own infrastructure, but we can work with vendors to see their technology firsthand. TMC are experimenting with virtual reality headsets, which allow us to view 360 degrees from our traffic cameras. This will assist the TMC and other agencies in assessing a live situation, especially when extreme weather conditions or other dangers prevent access. With a little further development, we will have a remote control traffic control system where we can extend a green light with a simple click of a button. While real-time drone traffic monitoring is not possible due to current regulations in Canada, the TMC is experimenting with smaller drones that do not face these restrictions. Weighing less than 250 grams, the small drone can cover up to 7 kilometers for 20 minutes and can provide streaming video back to the TMC. Growing traffic is part of a growing city. The city's traffic management center is always exploring innovative solutions and using the latest technology to help keep Calgarians safely on the move.
Okay, this is the background information about the TMC, the Mobility Operations Center. And one of the important thing is I want to mention is our group is considering one of the group doing a lot of innovations. This is from the top to bottom, from our director, managers, always encouraging us, is there anything you guys can try and to make the traffic flow a little bit better? Just even by a little bit, and it doesn't hurt to try. So this is I know if talking about the technology in traffic, and a lot of people think about the autonomous vehicle, connected vehicle, and this is one of the projects we have been working on for the last couple of years, and we did a connected corridor on 16th Avenue. So basically, we can send the traffic signal information to vehicles, and they can make speed adjustment or anything they can do to make sure they can hit multiple green at the certain speed. And yeah, here's a video to talk about more about that project.
Cars talking to traffic lights. Walk signals alerting your cell phone. One high-tech stretch of road along 16th Avenue North has a lot to say. The City of Calgary's connected vehicle pilot, led by our mobility team, is moving our city into a future powered by the Internet of Things. Right now, the Connected Vehicle Infrastructure, or CVI, on 16th Avenue makes it possible for Calgary Fire Department vehicles to turn signals green to avoid traffic delays, and any vehicle equipped with CVI technology to know when the light ahead will turn red before you arrive, and when road conditions are icy, so we can slow down gradually and stop safely. In the future, CVI technology will help city buses avoid collisions and snowplows to finish the job quicker. And as this technology becomes widespread, and cities like Calgary continue to invest in connected vehicle technology, the possibilities for improving road safety and reducing delays are endless. Moving ahead, the city will continue to work with vendors, providing them this testbed to evaluate their technology in the real world. Learn more about the City of Calgary's 16th Avenue Connected Vehicle Testbed at calgary.ca/connected vehicles.
If you're talking about the connected vehicle, it's more like a lot of people say we don't have the infrastructure, and also from the government level says we don't have the user. So it's more like a chicken and egg, right, situation. Hopefully, by developing those kind of the infrastructure, we can invite other vendors to come here, try our infrastructures, and make their product better. Eventually, one day, everybody can benefit from it. Okay. The other thing is I want to mention is we are dealing with traffic, and we rely on traffic counting to do all our decisions. Basically, all the decision we make is rely on the reliable traffic counts. Traditionally, we have tube counts and to calculate the traffic volume, and also using camera third-party vendors like MyOvision. We can do the turning movement count at certain intersection. And those equipment have to be manually set up to each location, and also doing the recordings, taking down by operators, upload to third-party vendors, and doing the traffic counts, and come back to us as the result. We were thinking we have 190 PTC cameras, and they can zoom into other locations. Probably one location depends on the line of sight. We can have like 4, 6 intersection close by. We can count by using our fixed infrastructure. So we a partnership with a group in IT to develop our internal traffic counting software. The software is so this is the example of a typical camera location, and the system can able to track each individual vehicle and know their trajectory. The AI actually doing all the work for us, and to give us in a report format the time period and also the turning movement for each location. This not only makes things cheaper and also makes things faster, because we own the infrastructure and also the technology to do the traffic counting. We can provide a lot of useful information to engineers, and they can make better decisions using those traffic counts. So the adaptive single control pilot is another technology we have been trying for the last couple years. Currently, we have one corridor is on my cloud trial, is fully active. The adaptive traffic control system requires lane-by-lane detections for each intersections. So basically, this intersection, the controller knows what's the traffic pattern on the road. They talk to each other, and if certain location have a congestion problem, or we are expecting higher demand than than the normal situation, the signal can actually making a decision call a different pattern to make traffic flow better. Although we are 24/7 and our operator can remotely log into the system pretty easily, but usually is when a traffic incident happens, there's a lot of things for us to do, so monitoring the condition and push the delay, the collision information to the website. They don't have time to make a whole series of the signal timing changes. With that technology, the controller actually can read how many vehicles on the road and to change signal timing to make a vehicle move along the entire corridor at the same time. This is the location for the first corridor we installed, and we have a master intersection on Glenmore and McLeod, and that intersection we set up as a master, and all those intersections along the Deerfield, not Deerfield, McLeod is actually talking to that intersection. Here is the study we did for after we implementing the adaptive system. You can see 74% of the time we see increasing the efficiency. Okay, the next project I want to talk about is using drones. Drones have been exist for a really long time, but under the current regulation in Canada, make us impossible to fly whenever we needed to fly. You have to register your drone to get your drone pilot license, and also you are not able to fly too far, and you have to maintain the drone is in line of sight. For us, although we have 190 cameras, we still have some locations we don't have video coverage. It will be nice for us to able to see everything when there's a traffic incident happen. So we look into this to the market. Actually, we found a drone classified as micro drones, which is under 250 grams, and is considering the micro drones. We are able to fly those drones whenever we need. We don't need to register the drone, and it's really easy to operate for our operators, and we don't need to get a drone pilot certificate as long as the drone operator able to fly the drone and they feel comfortable with that. And yeah, it's one thing is important, it's not bound by the same regulation as the other drones. So basically, if you read through the regulation, it's just don't be stupid and fly in the drone. You can fly. So this is the micro drones we are using. It's called the DJI Mavic Mini 4 Pro series. It's on the side actually you can see it's right down 249 grams. It's 1 gram. They designed on purposely so everybody can enjoy. And the flight time is 34 minutes, and it's able to cover 18 kilometers. But if you do the math, and if you fly 18 kilometers away, I'm pretty sure you won't get your drone back. The battery just doesn't last that long. Yeah, we have been using the drones for a lot of different kind of events, and really taking the advantage of using the drone as an extra side of eyes for our traffic signal operation. Here you go. Really good question. This is the list of the project we have been using the drones, and the first one, of course, is the traffic incident management. If there's a collision, we don't have a coverage, we launch the drones to able to see that, and also the emergency event monitoring, and which including the feeder-main break recently happened, and we are able to send out the drone daily actually to monitoring the progress for the repair work, and also what's the traffic impact. Our engineers make signal timing to adjust the traffic flow all the time. Special event monitoring, this is one thing we use quite often as well. during the Flames game, you know, there's a lot of construction activities going on, and during the Stampede area, the traffic pattern constantly change. In order for us to make a better signal timing, we need to know where the new traffic pattern, where the traffic goes. With the traditional camera, we can only see one location at a time. With the drone, you can see the entire complex and the entire corridor. You know where the traffic is using. They have like 6 different access points. Actually, we can see which access point got cleared faster. And next time we can do a better signal timing at the other location. And also we share the feed with on-site CPS. CPS officer can radio check their crews. Okay, the north side is clear. Detour all the people going north side and to make the egress a lot faster. PTZ camera site in selection, and traditionally we will send, before we put a new PTZ cameras, we have to send a bucket truck, a crew out to do a recording and at certain height to confirm the location is desired for, and it's taking a long time and also quite expensive to do that, just confirming the location. With using the drone, we can just go there and bring it up for 12 meters. You're done. You know what's the view you're gonna get. If it doesn't work, we can make adjustment to fly to other location to confirm the location. Other things that we did, light inspections during the night. You can easily see which area have the power, the street light outage, and parking studies, detour inspection. People counting is interesting. One project we did is during the Canada Day event, there's a pretty big field on Fort Calgary. So they have been trying to get the people count for how many people attending the event for quite a few years, but there's not a really good technology to do that because it's an open field and the people can get in from all other directions. So what we did is using the one fixed camera to record the main entry. So for 24 hours, the entire day, and also during the peak hour, we launched the drone to cover the entire area, using AI to count people actually, what's the percentage of people getting into the field through the main gate, and use that as a factor to estimate how many people actually get into the field. Yeah, the other things is construction site inspection and creating error photo is easy, and also the stockpile count with certain software. We can just fly to the yard and to see what's the material on the ground is still available. The next project I want to talk about is the Google Street View project. Actually, if you look at some of the location, you will find the City of Calgary logo instead of Google as through the Street View. That's because we update the map. We do a lot of set inspections for the city, and we think some of the newer location the Google have a latest Street View updated. It's great, but for some older locations or some locations we just finished a project, the Google Street View is not super useful. So actually we went to Google, ask them, do you guys able to come in and to do the update the Street View for us? And of course they said we can do that, but the city have to pay us to do that. But it's a free service. We asked them, how about we collect the data and send it to you guys, or even we can do it ourselves to update the Google Street View. And they were like, interesting. You guys are the first city in the world actually to talk about this one. So after a little bit of discussion, we decided to do it our own, and the city have the whole ownership of the videos we collected, and we process the data and upload to the Google server. Not only the city internal, all the public actually can benefit for using the latest Google Street View. The cameras which they recommend actually is a lower tier 8K resolution camera, but instead of that, we decided to go to the best camera available, probably use the same video for some other projects. The camera we choose is called the Insta360 Titan series. It's a 11K video. So from the image you can see this is the 4K video image size. This is 11K. The resolution is great. You can capture all the details when you go through it. Even after we did the comparison, we think our camera is better than Google's camera. Yeah. This is the data collection for the camera. You can see we just basically mount the camera on the vehicle. As the first thing you need to do is the cargo secure training. Is required for the two-person crew. This is a lesson learned from our initial test. The drivers will have some feedbacks that it's really hard for them to actually keep a track on where they have been go through the neighborhood. When they are driving, they have to make sure they go through all the area and also pay attention to the road. It's just too much. So instead of having two people operating two vehicles doing the data collection, we feel it's better to have two person as a crew and one driver and one navigator. We use a GPS tracker to track where the neighborhood have been cleared. Yeah, the camera is not water resistant. We have to take them down during the rain situation. And also there's another lessons learned and to use a smaller vehicle, because if you use the too big of the vehicle, you cannot see the road too clear. The challenging part for this is we underestimate how much of the data, how big the data it could be, and they have 8 cameras, 8 lanes in the camera. So each camera will using 45 gigabytes per hour. So if you add them up, it's a 360 gigabytes of the data per hour. For us to keep that data, it's quite challenging. Luckily enough, I don't know what kind of technology they have been using. After stitching all 8 cameras together, the video size actually reduced to 33.9 gigabytes per hour, which allow us to keep the video for a longer time for other projects if needed. Yeah.
Not to do all the city. They just, like Google Street View still does the city.
Yes.
But these are just when you need those one-off updates. So you think, oh, we just finished the BMO, then there's new roadways in there. There's going to be lots of people using it.
Yes.
Let's go and hit that ourselves rather than wait for Google.
Yes. That's correct. And actually, funny you mentioned that, and that's on our to-do list this week. We're going to update the 17th Avenue and McLeod, that intersection. Yeah.
One yesterday.
Yeah. So the processing, our Windows computer is not fast enough. We have to use a Apple computer, and the processing time is a 4:1 ratio. Basically, 1 minute of the recording actually take 4 minutes to process that. After we process the data, we will upload to Google, and Google do all those masking, like blur out the license plate, people's face. That's all taken care of by Google. And yeah, you probably are not able to see very clear from here. This is instead of Google's logo on it, City of Calgary take the credit for that. And also we are able to take down the video if we want to. Yeah. Yeah, at the same time, and we also working with another IT group to reuse the 360 video we collected and to do the pothole detection. So pothole and the cracks is always an issue. People complain a lot on the road, and it's very hard for our crew to know where the trouble spot. And every year there's probably during the spring there's always a new potholes coming up, and we spend a lot of money to actually to hire a third-party contractor to collect the data for us. We were thinking like, if we have the video available ourselves, why don't we do it just internally? So that's one of the projects we have been working is developing an AI algorithm to do the pavement condition assessment and also to record all the road deficiencies to fix them in the future. Yeah, just with I just threw a fun fact at the TomTom Travel Index. I wish the mobility operation can take all the credit, but this is a collaborative effort from design, construction, maintenance, and service support. There are TomToms every year. They do a study across North America and the city, all the cities, and this is the ranking number. Actually, Canada, there are 12 cities big enough to make on the list. If you look at the Calgary, we are number 10 in worst congestion city. We are better than a lot of the cities smaller than us, and also better than our digital twin city. And this is the number per 10 kilometers of the travel, right? So it's the city of Calgary use 30 minutes. And if you travel the same distance in Toronto, it takes you 29 minutes. So technology is always helping for us. I think we need to utilize all the technology available to help us to do a better job, and hopefully we can keep lowering down our ranking in the future years. And yeah. Okay, that's all I got for the presentation, and if you guys have any questions.
Questions? All right, Sandra, come on.
So that's a really good question. So for those videos, and we did a privacy impact study, and of course this is one of the most important things that we did. Is the current policy is we only retain the footage for 1 year maximum, and we rewrite the hard drive once the data got full. And currently, we didn't do a full-scale rollout for the project, and considering probably next year, we're gonna have a full-time crew to doing more data collection. We're probably not able to retain the data for more than 1 year physically anyway. This is considering a huge amount of the data we want to we keep. And after the video being uploaded to Google, is gonna be stored in the Google server forever, unless we take them down. So we don't need to keep that data for more than a year.
I have a question about the micro drones. So with the light weight of them, how do they fare in the wind? Calgary can be quite windy. So what have you found with wind and micro drones?
Yeah, definitely those micro drones, and they don't perform super well during the extremely windy weather, but they are rated at level 5 maximum wind speed resistance. And considering this drone can go 55 kilometers per hour, ideally, if you don't fly your drone far away, you can use the drone for if it's the wind speed lower than 40K, you can use it. We definitely try to stretch it, use it a lot colder and the minus 25-degree weather and faster than 10.7 meter per second wind condition is holding up really strong. And also we, for some other projects, we do have other drones, bigger drones that we can do for like doing the less promising weather condition. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Z. I have a question about the connected vehicles. Is there any risk of a vehicle coming in that you wouldn't necessarily want them to be able to control the time or the green lights?
Yeah, well, the connected vehicle actually right now is the regular vehicle won't be able to send in command. They are just the receiving end. We are giving control to those snow plows. Well, right now we haven't. It's only the emergency vehicle have the privilege to making we call preemption calls, and to the system they can trigger longer green time or stop other approach. Yeah.
Z, two or 3 weeks ago, you gave snowplow data and background to a hackathon that was doing a hackathon on quantum annealing and quantum computing. You got some really cool results. Like when the group that won was about how to use quantum to improve snowplow routing. So, how do you decide what new technologies to play with and to test?
Wow, that's a really good question. So I guess for us, we just looking for always looking for the market if there's any new technology available, and attending conference or to know what's available on the market, because we only know what we know, and we don't know if there's a certain technology is able to help us with certain issue. So we always ask our internal crews and to raise their concerns or like propose, ask questions. Is there any way we can do something better? Because they operating the traffic signals on daily basis. They know what's their wish list. They don't have to come with a solution. They come to us. That's our responsibility to look for a solution for them.
All right, Dave's got a question. And Dave's really tight with Z anyway, so this will be really like, what did you do on Friday night and why wasn't I invited?
Great presentation, Z. Just wondering, with all the changes in technology, do you guys dedicate a certain amount of budget or resources for innovating all these great solutions? You guys have like a ton of great innovations going on.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Yes, we, as I mentioned before, and our group is a little bit different. The innovation comes actually from top to bottom. We always encourage to try new things. We do have a dedicated budget for innovations, and anything we wanted to try, and we always get support from higher up. Yeah.
That's great, Z. And I think it's a neat chance just to talk about the innovation through procurement process that we have, because there's lots of city folks in here. So, and we can get on the wrong side of procurement if we talk to a company and go too far down the road about how we could apply their new technology. And it happens at trade shows, right? You get to see everything, but then you can't continue that conversation when you're back home and you really want to look to apply it. So through the innovation through procurement program with our supply group, you can post an industry challenge. And we're just trying some of these out. I think you'll see one coming up. And it can be things like very general but high level. I want to know how people are crossing the sidewalk in the downtown. Like how many people are jaywalking, how many people are using scooters, dogs, whatever. And you can say, just pose that to the industry. How can we better understand how people are using crosswalks using technology? And then you might have 10 vendors will respond, and they'll say, we've got this technology that uses cell phone data, or this technology uses heat vision, or this technology uses LiDAR and AI vision. And then we can, under a threshold, I think it's it's $75,000. We can choose not to pilot any of those, or we can bring them in-house and say, we're gonna pilot vendor X, Y, and Z, and then and then work with them to say, you know, I really like what you've got going on here, but I'd like your dashboard to show more of this. Or actually, I want a clear picture on this. And then at the end of the 3 or 6 months, or however long the pilot is, then you can make an informed RFP, right? So you make a scaled back $75,000 investment in pilot, and then you might have a $5 million contract, but you're making, your RFP might say, I want these components from vendor A and I want these components from vendor B, but you've got to see how those integrate with our systems. It's a lot like, you know, if you don't pilot, you might end up in that Phoenix payroll system where you purchase something and then it doesn't work, so you throw more money at it to try and fix it, and then you've spent too much money to not have it work, so you spend more money. Well, if you pilot things first in the Wave or with the Wave support, we can avoid some of that. Right? So we hope to see you here lots with your budget.
Sounds good.
Okay, Brindis.
I was really interested when you were talking about AI for traffic counting. And it was kind of interesting, and I'd be interested to know a little bit more about what you're doing that way. And as a former City of Calgary data collector, it was really nice to finally see the spreadsheet of all the counts, because it suddenly was a really good flashback to many, many intersections.
Yeah, this is more like my wish list as well. Before I joined the City of Calgary, and I worked for City of Regina doing traffic counting as my first job as well. I guess all the traffic engineers start with the traffic counting. So that's how Melvision actually started. And their founder is doing traffic counting. What if we can have a new platform or technology we can do the traffic counting? When I was in Regina, I don't have the money, doesn't have the infrastructure like this to pilot those. But after I came to Calgary and with the technology, the support from higher up, and we can make these things happen. So, yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.